When you look at the critical issues facing our world, what do you see? We see breakthrough medicines getting to patients in record time. We see harnessing natural gas, unleashing the promise of clean energy. We see engineers simulating the future to improve today. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, focusing core strengths to create a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved. When you look at the critical issues facing our world, what do you see? We see 1 billion more people breathing free. We see access to fresh food being the global norm, not the exception. We see homes staying cooler without the planet getting warmer. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, focusing core strengths to create a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved. We see harnessing natural gas, unleashing the promise of clean energy. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, creating a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved. We see engineers simulating the future to improve today. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, creating a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved. We see breakthrough medicines getting to patients in record time. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, creating a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved. We see access to fresh food being the global norm, not the exception. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, creating a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved. We see heating breakthroughs clearing the air for billions. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, creating a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved. We see homes staying cooler without the planet getting warmer. At Emerson, when issues become inspiration, creating a better world isn't just a result, it's a responsibility. Emerson, consider it solved.
One of the approaches that KKR takes in Asia is to be more of a holistic solutions provider to companies and to stakeholders in the marketplace. As the private equity industry has evolved and KKR has evolved, what we've done is we've created different tools to help our competitive advantage in the market, as well as the way in which we engage with our portfolio companies. We bring deep industry specialization, deep operational expertise, and a global platform that's really suited to helping these local companies grow. One of the key tenets of our strategy in Asia has been from day one, really localizing the investment teams. Asia is not one big market. It's a collection of 8 or 10 different local markets. So our approach has been really to hire local executives and build our business in each country around a talented team of locals. In the last 30 years, the world economy has globalized dramatically. The global network is critically important. The businesses that we're investing in Asia, whether it's China, India, or Vietnam, these companies are looking to maximize their global growth potential. Our ability to provide access to customers, distribution, know-how from around the world is a huge advantage as we deal with these companies. The hallmark of what we do is we take a long-term approach to investing. We're not worried about the quarter-to-quarter earnings. We're really focused on understanding what's going to drive sustainable value creation in businesses over 3, 5, 10 years. Asia today is an incredibly dynamic part of the world with some of the highest GDP growth rates we see. So our opportunity is to be partners with great local entrepreneurs. Some of the most exciting investment themes in Asia really revolve around the domestic consumption trends. You have around 60% of the global population living in Asia today. Some incredibly interesting demographics between China, India, and Southeast Asia revolving around the growing middle class, rising disposable incomes, and consumer power. In that context, when you think about industries like consumer products, retail, and healthcare, there are significant opportunities for investment. KKR's approach to private equity has always been around providing solutions to our partners. So our core business is really providing capital to great management teams and industry-leading franchises to help them really think about the long-term opportunity to improve their business and create value for shareholders.
Fluffy. Fluffy. Fluffy.
Good thing you can now view your bills online. Sign up for paperless billing today.
Every brand has a goal. To be this or that for the consumer. To do this or that for its audience. To fix this. To grow that. To build from scratch. At Team Asia, we take a holistic approach in solving marketing challenges and use a variety of channels to reach consumers in meaningful ways. Experience is the relationship we build between the audience and the brand. The integration of channels is what makes everything cohesive and relevant. This approach we call integrated marketing experience. Team Asia brings out the best in branding and design, events and activation, content marketing, digital marketing, and video production. Our team has the best players in the game, armed with the knowledge to implement a strong game plan that fits your goals. Are you launching a new brand? Are you creating a positive brand impression? If you're looking for ways to grow your brand, the first order of business is to choose a team of experts. We are Team Asia, and this is how we do it.
We have a lot of plans. Ang dami naming expansion plan. Tapos merong pandemic. Pero na-realize namin na we have to continue. I really felt that na yung solution namin is something na kakailanganin ng mga MSMEs. Alam naming mahirapan sila. Kasi nakita namin sa data na maraming Filipino MSMEs is focus lang locally. Yung pinakamerkado nila, dito lang sila nagbebenta sa Pilipinas. At yung channel nila, the way they sell in physical store. As dito lang locally sa Pilipinas. So nung nag-lockdown, alam namin na wala silang bebentahan. Their business will stop. We saw a lot of solutions na nag-o-offer na bringing them online. Pero for us, bringing them online is not enough. Will not just make you online, but will also make you global. Maraming siyempre yung logistics companies sa Pilipinas. Pero nung nakausap namin yung FedEx, alam mo, iba yung gaan ng loob sa unang mo pa lang silang makausap. Naintindihan nila yung ginagawa namin. Ang gusto ko sa kanila is that they're willing to work with us na isang startup lang, bagong-bago pa lang. And we have a certain way of doing things. Pero sila, they willing to adjust or listen to that. Kasi ang pagpapadala ng produkto mula sa Pilipinas at sa ibang bansa, hindi siya madali. Kung wala sila, mahirapan kami na magpadala ng mga produkto sa ibang bansa. I'm proud of our Filipino products. I'm proud of Filipino entrepreneurs who continually makes them. I'm proud of our company, Easy Fulfill, that helps these entrepreneurs make their products global.
When I grow up, will there still be birds? What about turtles or whale sharks? Please stop making animals disappear.
When I grow up, can I still swim in the beach? They say some beaches are too polluted? What does that mean?
Please help me. I don't want to grow up in a dying planet. If you're gonna produce energy, make sure it's good for all of us.
At First Gen, we believe it's our responsibility to provide cleaner energy that's good for the environment. So we only produce power that is 100% clean, 100% reliable, using 0% coal. Not just for us, but for more generations to come. First Gen, 100% green power, 100% good power.
So, are we good? I want to ask, what do you think you're doing? The air is so dirty now. I'm probably gonna grow up with asthma. It's always so hot, and there's not enough water for everyone. Other times, there's flooding because storms are getting stronger. That's scary. What kind of future am I gonna get from you? If you're gonna produce energy, please make sure it's good for all of us.
At First Gen, we believe it's our responsibility to provide cleaner energy that's good for the environment. So we only produce power that is 100% clean, 100% reliable, using 0% coal. Not just for us, but for more generations to come. First Gen, 100% green power, 100% good power.
So, are we good?
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the 9th Arangkada Philippines Forum, Foreign Investment in the Post-Pandemic Philippines. Our program will begin in a few minutes. But before we begin, a few reminders. We understand that some delegates had difficulties accessing the webinar yesterday. To ensure that you do not miss on any of the rich content from the excellent discussions shared by our speakers yesterday, we have sent a link of the recording to your emails. We encourage everyone to actively participate in the discussions today, especially during the open forum and the Q&A. Should you have any questions to raise, kindly type it in the Q&A box. You may find the Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom platform. Our speakers and panelists would be glad to answer their questions given enough time. However, should you have any other questions after the forum, you may send them at forum@arangkadaphilippines.com. We invite you to tweet about the event by using the event hashtag Arangkada Forum 2020. We also invite you to like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com Arangkada Philippines. Follow us on Twitter at ArangkadaPH. And please do also connect with us on LinkedIn by looking for Arangkada Philippines. Finally, we'd like to ask everyone to answer a few poll questions that we will be flashing on the screen. We highly value your feedback. utilities, currently 60% Filipino, 40% foreigner. Telecommunications, currently 60% Filipino, 40% foreign. And finally, transportation, currently 60% Filipino and 40% foreign. So thank you everyone for participating in the polling that we just had. Please do remain on your screens as we are about to begin the program in a few minutes. But before then, we would like to thank our sponsors and our partners who have so generously made this forum possible. Our platinum sponsors, Emerson, ICTSI, KKR, Meralco, and Team Asia. Our gold sponsors, Converge, FedEx, First Philippine Holdings, Royal Cargo, and Filipina Shell. Our silver sponsors, AIG, Bosch, Cal Energy, Capital One, Chevron, Quezon Power Limited, Santos Knight Frank, and SGV. And for our virtual room sponsor, Eastern Communications. By the way, later there will be a game by Eastern Communications that's on the Kahoot platform. You may visit the Kahoot site for this. Our bronze sponsors, BDO, Manila Water, and Mitsubishi Corporation. Our patrons, Bank of the Philippine Islands, Isuzu, International Workplace Group, Marriott International, Mawel Chemical Corporation, NYK Phil, and Sojitz Ship Management, Inc. Our supporters, Big Box, Maersk, MCX International, Procter & Gamble Company, Philippine Center Corporation, SPI Global, Sun Life, and TechRep, Inc. We'd also like to thank our event partners, the Bankers Association of the Philippines, the British Chamber of Commerce Philippines, CCI France Philippines, Chamber of Mines of the Philippines, Confederation of Wearables Exporters of the Philippines, Employers Confederation of the Philippines, Electric Vehicle Association of the Philippines, the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry, the Foundation for Economic Freedom, the Government Academe Industry Network, the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Kiani Philippines, Makati Business Club, Management Association of the Philippines, the Nordic Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Philippine Ecozones Association, PhilExport, Philippine Chamber of Manufacturers, the Shareholders Association of the Philippines, and the Tax Management Association of the Philippines. We'd also like to encourage all of you to join the midday and afternoon breakout sessions that we have organized specially for this forum. Please visit www.investphilippines.info/forum2020 under Forum Agenda, Midday Breakout Sessions, and sign up for these virtual rooms to have access. Just to give you a preview of everything that's going to happen during the midday, at 12 noon on virtual room A, we will have a session on mining. In virtual room B, we will have a session on tourism. We will also have a session on agribusiness as a key to inclusive growth. And all of this will be amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Another session that we will have for midday is the session on infrastructure development project videos. There are two playback sessions entitled Philippines Pathway to Asia in a Post-Pandemic World, a virtual economic briefing featuring DOF Secretary Carlos Dominguez and Presidential Advisor and Flagship Programs, and Project Secretary Vivencio Dizon. And finally, in the afternoon, we will have a playback of advancing e-payments via public-private partnership featuring the BSP Secretary Benjamin Diokno and DOF USEC Antoinette Tionco, brought to you by the Makati Business Club and the USAID e-Peso. Ladies and gentlemen, and now to begin the program, let us all stand for the Philippine National Anthem to be led by Froy Tahale.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa lulupi, di ka pasisiil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw, may dilag ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin ng araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim, lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mang-aapi, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Thank you very much, Froy, for leading us in singing the national anthem. And now to officially open the forum and to tell us what to expect in today's program, we have the Senior Advisor of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Mr. John D. Forbes.
Gandro Umaga. Thank you, Manette. And thank you, Freud, for that wonderful rendition of the national anthem. And welcome, everyone, to the 9th Arangkada Annual Policy Forum of the Joint Foreign Chambers of the Philippines. I believe I have some slides that should be going up at this point, but let me start with the first slide, which again acknowledges our many, many corporate sponsors. Manette has just listed them all, but it's really fantastic the way that these companies have supported the themes and advocacies of the Joint Foreign Chambers in Arangkada, which means to accelerate as many years as 9 years. And of course, we don't welcome you today to a ballroom as we have in the past. However, we have been right on time. Yesterday, we had a fantastic program. So thank you, corporate sponsors, 36 of them. And I would also like to thank, in the next slide, we have our event partners who are basically table sponsors. We have virtual tables, and Manette again has acknowledged these, and our media sponsors, and of course, the organizers, the 7 members of the Joint Foreign Chambers in partnership with the University of the Philippines Public Administration Foundation and USAID. Thank you, all partners and sponsors. Next slide, please. This is the overall program. Day 1 is over. It was quite successful. I joined Manette in some regrets that some people had difficulty in accessing, and I hope you can get a chance to look at the recording and you're with us today. But we really had a fantastic day yesterday, and I'm sure we're going to have a fantastic day today. We're going to start with the gentleman, a good friend I will introduce shortly, who's president of the MAP, and he will be followed by another good friend who's a retired U.S. ambassador who's now based with U.S. ASEAN Business Council as its vice president for Southeast Asia. And he's zooming in from, I believe, Thailand today, but he lives in Singapore and he frequently visits Manila with keynote speeches. To be followed by our first panel. Now, Secretary Puya was supposed to record a message, and we got information today that instead her undersecretary, who we know very well as well, Bengzon, will read her message, and then we'll shift over to a panel with the president of the Chamber of Mines, Jerry Brimo, and a frequent panelist for us over the years, Eileen Clemente of Raja Travel on tourism, and then Dr. Dr. Briones. No, he's been replaced by Chris Ilagan, but Dr. Briones will join Chris Ilagan in the breakout session. And then the moderator, who actually spoke to us last year, is Risa Mataring, who is with MAP and is very, very well known as a prominent businesswoman in the country. And then after the midday breaks, which have just been described so well by Manette, these were well attended yesterday, and give you an opportunity for the panelists to go into more detail about their sectors. Next slide. Those sectors I just mentioned, as well as this wonderful event that Ambassador Romualdez hosted in Washington, D.C. for over 100 American corporations to promote their additional investment into the Philippines. So Secretary Dominguez and Secretary Dizon were in this event, along with 4 large U.S. corporate spokespersons. Next, please. And the afternoon panel will focus on infrastructure, but with a different twist. It won't just be the usual airports and seaports and road and rail. We will have that from a deputy to Secretary Dizon. We just heard that this morning, that he was called away. But then we'll look at some new kinds of infrastructure, such as the role of the private sector in public health, with the president of Ayala Health, Paula Borromeo, and we'll have Dr. Chua from the World Bank, who is the team leader for the Philippine Digital Economy report that was released by the World Bank 2 months ago. And then we'll have Michael de Guzman, who is with KKR and has been in infrastructure as an investment banker for over 20 years, and will explain about KKR, which has invested $1 billion in the last year in the Philippines, probably the largest single foreign investor in the country recently. And Ed Francisco, who is a returning guest to our panels, who is president of BDO Capital. So I'm hoping that Paula will talk about public health infrastructure, and Dr. Chua about digital infrastructure, and Ed and Michael can talk about PPPs and their role in more traditional, well, all infrastructure, all different kinds of infrastructure. So do I have another slide? We will be issuing a policy brief. It's not ready yet, and it won't be in print initially. It will be virtual, but it will follow the theme of this. It will have the poll. It will have the Make It Happen campaign of Secretary Lopez that he explained yesterday, and a lot of other information. We're still working on it, but we will eventually be emailing it to all participants, and probably have a press conference for its release as well. I didn't note that we do have a press conference today of the JFC presidents. So only the media are invited to that, but we have about 30 media participants. So, and we have a major announcement to make at that press conference. So with that, I'll shift over to the introduction. I see my friend Francis. Francis, good morning.
Good morning, Jan.
You look great and happy and staying safe, and we're maskless today, but I think we're all in great condition. So it's really a distinct pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker. Attorney Francis Lim is the outgoing president of the Management Association of the Philippines, of which I'm a member, and the incoming president of Phoenix, the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, of which I'm also a member. So congratulations, Francis, for your service in that and ongoing. And he's also a trustee of the Judicial Reform Initiative, of which I'm a trustee. So I've seen a lot of Francis over the last few years, which is great. And before, in the National Competitiveness Council as well. but you have a day job as a senior partner of the prominent Accra law firm. But you're truly, Francis, a man for all seasons, for your many accomplishments and contributions to civil society. And you teach law at Ateneo, Sambeda, and the Philippine Judicial Academy. And you're a former president and CEO of the Philippine Stock Exchange, former president of the Shareholders Associations of the Philippines, and I noted a trustee of the JRI, along with trustees from AmCham, myself, CanCham, Julian Payne, and the European Chamber, Nabil Francis, among others. And you've assisted in the enactment of more than a half dozen important reform laws, and most importantly, or equally importantly, various complicated rules for the Philippine judiciary at different levels of the judiciary. Thank you for all of that. So as a member of MAP, I remember your first very well-attended speech at the Shangri-La Makati last January, sort of a tradition that we don't follow anymore, and hopefully we will soon go to ballrooms for MAP presidents to give their first speeches again. He started with a slide. His first slide was showing the Philippine FDI inflow compared to the ASEAN 5. And it was a disappointing number. And I think that's why you put it up, Francis, because you felt that the Philippines could do, that you wanted to highlight Philippines was not optimizing a very important opportunity for growth and for jobs, while Vietnam and other economies were doing better. So Attorney Lim, Francis, the Joint Foreign Chambers wish to thank you and MAP for the excellent partnership we enjoy with MAP. Over the last year, it has gotten even better. We are aligned on important policy issues and often join each other's public statements and letters concerning reform legislation and other policies. Salamat po. Francis, will you please take the virtual podium to deliver your address?
Thank you, John, for that very generous introduction. Anyway, good morning, everyone. First of all, on behalf of the Management Association of the Philippines, let me thank you, John, and Arangkada Philippines for inviting me to give the opening remarks for Day 2 of the 9th Arangkada Philippines Forum 2020. Your theme, Foreign Investments in the Post-Pandemic Philippines, is timely as it is necessary. With the diversity and wealth of experience and wisdom of the speakers and participants in the forum, I can safely say that the Arangkada will have more proposals to push for more inclusive policies and programs that will help bring in more foreign direct investments to the Philippines. And as I did during my inaugural speech, the Philippines, I'd like to say that there's no doubt that the Philippines has been lagging behind many of its Asian counterparts in attracting FDIs. Based on the 2019 Global Competitiveness Report of the World Economic Forum, the Philippines is the least competitive among the founding members of the ASEAN. We're ranked 64th among 141 economies, while Singapore ranked first, Malaysia 27th, Thailand 40th, and Indonesia 50th. Undoubtedly, this is partly because doing business in the Philippines is not as easy as doing business in many parts of the ASEAN. While the Philippines registered double-digit increase of 29 notches in the 2020 ease of doing business, we still rank 95th among 190 economies. Other founding members of the ASEAN have fared much better. Singapore ranked first, Malaysia 12th, Thailand 21st, Indonesia 73rd. Even ASEAN newcomers Brunei and Vietnam have already outranked us by placing 66th and 70th respectively, or 20 notches above us. Sadly for us, we're lumped together with countries like Bosnia, El Salvador, Nepal, Guatemala, Togo, Samoa, and Sri Lanka in terms of ease of doing business. Notably, there are no other ASEAN countries in the group where we are ranked. As a result, our ability to attract FDIs has significantly suffered. According to UNCTAD's World Investment Report of 2020, foreign direct investment inflows to the Philippines fell to $5 billion in 2019, down from $6.6 billion in 2018. This 5.9 billion FDI in 2019 is more than 3 billion less than the 8.7 billion FDIs we had in 2017. In fact, our FDI data are a pittance when compared to the founding members of the ASEAN. Again, based on UNCTAD data, in 2019 alone, Indonesia had more than 4 times FDIs than us at 23.1 billion pesos. Vietnam had more than 3 times our FDIs at 16.1 billion pesos, and Malaysia at 7.7 billion pesos. This is not even to compare ourselves with Singapore, a small city-state which had $110 billion FDIs in 2019. As you may know, John, the COVID-19 poses challenges to us as for other countries. But not surprisingly, our CEOs are optimistic as they can be. Based on the 2020 PwC MAP CEO survey presented during the MAP CEO International Conference held last September 15, 83% of our CEOs expect the Philippine economy to recover within 1 to 3 years, and we now see signs of recovery. 59% of these CEOs are confident about their organization's revenue growth prospect over the next 12 months. And more than that, 90% of them are confident about the revenue growth over the next 3 years. MAP has also commissioned a study by the School of Economics of the University of Asia and the Pacific, or UANP, that can serve as a tool to better understand the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak in Philippine business and how we can proceed to more normalcy and recovery. Needless to stress, these are essential in making our country stay competitive post-pandemic with our neighbors. There are similarities in the findings by the MAP, PwC, and UANP studies. For example, like the PwC MAP survey, where 49% of the CEOs said that the government should provide access to financing and guarantees, and 54% of them said that there is a need for tax incentives. The UANP study found that business enterprises, especially the micro and small ones, are appealing for more financial help in the form of access to loans, subsidies, and tax breaks. Digitization also came up prominently in both studies. In particular, the UANP study emphasizes that digitization and digital transformation cannot be postponed. Likewise, both studies mention restoring consumer spending as an ignition point to spark economic activities and eventually turn the wheels of commerce to normal once again. Easing restrictions and streamlining government processes also figured highly among the non-financial assistance sought by the firm. We've shared the UANP study with the DOF, and we will share the studies with Arangkada to help it formulate proposals that can help the country attract more foreign direct investments to the Philippines. So the question now is, what do we do to make our country attract more FDIs in the light of the pandemic? Surely, our government has been undertaking reforms before and during the pandemic. Just to cite a few. Number one, in 2018, Congress enacted Republic Act 11032, more particularly known as Ease of Doing Business Act, to make doing business in the Philippines much easier than what it was before. We, at the Management Association of the Philippines, welcome this move, considering that we're ranked 171 first place, 171 out of 190 countries in opening up a business. In the ASEAN, only Laos and Cambodia are ranked below us. We at MAP look forward to the full implementation of the law. Number two, the Supreme Court has amended its rules of procedure with a view to shortening court processes, which is partly to blame for a low ranking in the ease of doing business report. Number three, likewise, the Supreme Court has created the Judicial Integrity and Corruption and Investigation Board to rid the judiciary of misfits and of repeated complaint against our judicial system and a disincentive for foreign investors. The Department, number four, the Department of Trade and Industry is vigorously pursuing the cities and municipalities competitiveness index to make doing business easier at the LGU level. Number five, as a response to the pandemic, Congress has enacted Bayanihan 1 and 2 Acts to help resuscitate the company. More relevantly, for our purpose today, these two laws authorize the President to relax some of the bureaucratic requirements that have weighed down on our competitiveness as a country. Number six, at a very advanced stage in the legislative process are the proposed Financial Institutions Strategic Transfer Act, or FIST, and the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE. Of particular relevance to attracting FDIs is CREATE, which is a bold and historic economic reform posed by the Department of Finance. More than being a stimulus package to provide instant relief to businesses suffering from the pandemic, CREATE is envisioned to make the country competitive by drastically bringing down the income tax rates and providing other tax reliefs for corporations and partnerships doing business in the Philippines. We at the management of the Association of the Philippines, like Arangkada, have supported these initiatives and continue to support measures aimed at making our country competitive in attracting FDIs. But we need to do more. We must not rest on our laurels, so to speak. We still have a lot of work cut out for us moving forward. The restrictive provisions in our Constitution and our laws need to be addressed. We have problems and outdated laws and regulations as we have enforcement issues with our other laws. We have to clear up our name in the global perception surveys as we need to strengthen our institutions. In closing, our efforts to attract FDIs should be benchmarked not against what we've been doing in the past. Rather, we should benchmark ourselves against what other countries are doing. We have to do much more than what our ASEAN counterparts are doing and be consistent about it. Lest we will not be able to catch up with them in attracting foreign direct investments to the Philippines. Thank you, stay safe, and keep healthy.
Thank you very much for that wonderful message, Mr. Lim. To introduce our first keynote speaker, please welcome the President of the Australia-New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Daniel Alexander.
Thanks, Manette, and thanks, Attorney Lim. What a great speech and a great way to open today's session. As Manette said, hi everyone. My name's Dan Alexander, the President of the Australia-New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, and in my day job, I'm the Managing Director of the Canon Business Service Centre, where we support Canon customers across Australia, New Zealand, the US, and the UK. It gives me great pleasure today to introduce our next speaker, former Ambassador Mike Mikulak. He is the third speaker to join our forum from Singapore, where he's based as the Senior Vice President and Regional Managing Director of the US ASEAN Business Council. In this position, he leads the Council's advocacy programs and engages regularly with leaders throughout ASEAN. In fact, this week we understand he's leading a US business delegation in Thailand, but thankfully has made the time to speak to us today at our forum. Although he holds a MS degree in applied physics and worked at NASA, Ambassador Mikulak became a US diplomat for 30 years and not a spaceman at NASA, serving as US ambassador to APEC and ambassador to Philippines until 2011. He also holds an MPA from Harvard's Kennedy School, as do many Filipinos who are dedicated to the public service. Ambassador Michalak is one of the most knowledgeable and experienced Americans in the business community in Southeast Asia, and he knows well how governments in Washington, Beijing, and Tokyo work. As I said, it gives me great pleasure to invite Ambassador to come up to our virtual stage, and over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Dan, for that very kind introduction. And I will say that I have found that over the years, I'm a much better diplomat than I was a physicist. But it was fun. It was fun. But it's a great pleasure for me to be here at the 9th Arangkada Policy Brief Forum. I saw the agenda from yesterday, and it looks like you're off to a grand start. And there's a great panel setting up to follow our remarks here today. So I hope everyone's ready for a really great and interesting day. I really enjoyed our previous speaker. I think that he had a lot to say, and I think that there's a lot that you may hear me repeat in some of the remarks that I'm going to make, because I'm going to talk to you today as well on doing business in the new normal and what that means for investment. But this time sort of focusing a little bit on American investment in the new normal and what that means for the Philippines. You know, last year at this time, in order to figure out where Americans were going to invest and what factors would play into those decisions, we had to think about the US-China relationship. We knew we were talking about shifting supply chains, and that overdependence on single source suppliers was a mistake that needed to be rectified. But where was the relationship heading? And what was the next set of tariffs going to bring? Decoupling was a new buzzword, and what did that mean? And to what extent would that impact supply chains? And what extent would that impact the shape of global trade going forward? And especially the evolution of the digital economy. Well, fast forward a year, and all those considerations are still with us. But there's a lot more complicating the situation as well, starting with the pandemic. As you all know, the pandemic has been in our faces for the last year, with over 62.5 million cases and 1.5 million people dead because of it. The quick action and determined response of most of the ASEAN countries is paying off in lower death rates, lower infection rates, and even the beginnings of some strategies for coping with the virus and reopening economies. Still, the IMF is predicting that the global economy could see trade and investment flows fall by as much as 30% and 40% respectively over this past year. And closer to home, we just heard about the ASEAN 5 earlier. Well, you're going to hear about it again, because the ASEAN 5, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam are going to show a drop in GDP of 3.2% for the current year, before rebounding to by over 6% next year. The Philippines has done a little better than most, because it's been staying in positive territory in the GDP growth figures this year, as well as a projected growth of 7% for next year. But unfortunately, its unemployment figures are really the second highest among the ASEAN 5. However, disappointing as these numbers are, there are, as I mentioned, some places where economies are opening up a bit, even if they have to do it in fits and starts as spikes of COVID emerge and require stiff measures to put them down. People living in Thailand are free from COVID-related restrictions, though borders remain closed except under certain circumstances. Singapore has been working on systems of reciprocal opening that would allow some travel between Singapore and countries with similar risk profiles. The idea being that people might be willing to travel to places where the risk is no greater than it is in their home country. Companies like Expedia and Marriott are working overtime to find ways to open travel markets to allow business to get back to the new normal. So now we have the trade war and the pandemic to think about. However, there's one more variable about which we need to think, and that is changes in American leadership which could play an important role in determining the direction of future trade policies between the US and the rest of the world that could have ripple effects far beyond America's borders. And before I continue, I should make it clear that my views are mine alone and should not be attributed to the US ASEAN Business Council, just in case I step on somebody's toes. But I'm sure you're all familiar with the American story, where the current administration basically provided no leadership, insufficient support, and little hope to a majority of citizens during this COVID pandemic. And mishandling of the virus, among other reasons, was probably the main reason Trump lost the election by 7 million votes and is still in denial. However, the American business community, in spite of the current serious public health situation and the accompanying record unemployment, remains on track to return to close to pre-COVID levels of growth by the end of 2021. The Conference Board projection for 2021 is to return to about 3.3% growth for the US economy, and this will be a solid indicator that the US economy will be ready to continue with its investment strategies. American companies have always been prepared to search for trade facilitation and liberalization wherever they can find it, and being fairly resilient will put them into a good position to restart streams of goods and services. So against that background, what do we know about the new Biden administration and its views on trade and investment in Asia and ASEAN that might help us to better understand how America's political future will shape its international investment plans? Well, first and foremost, the reason that we're talking about shifting supply chains is the trade war between the US and China, and that is unlikely to go away anytime soon. As many of you already know, there's been a sea change in the US regarding America's views of China. And even though it started a while before Trump arrived on the scene, it was kind of like a fire with gasoline being poured on it when he began ratcheting up pressure. So I think that for the foreseeable future, we are likely to have some kind of trade action against China. And even though the tenor of our dispute will no doubt cool down quite a bit, it will be some time before we see the tariffs reduced and understand under what conditions they will be removed. We have some very real differences with China that will not be resolved anytime soon, and neither side is likely to change their positions anytime during the early days of the new administration. But I think the main outlines of the Biden foreign policy will be to work to restore confidence in the ability of America to lead and to do its best to repair some of the damage done by this last administration. Of course, we still have 2 months in which Trump can continue to wreak havoc, and the Biden administration will need to take some time, even more time because of the delaying tactics of the current administration, to assess the damage and triage what's worth keeping and what needs to be repaired or reversed. We've already heard of Biden's plans to rejoin the climate change consensus and to rejoin the WHO. And this fits in with his vow to pay more attention to America's allies and partners, which of course includes the Philippines. Biden has noted that America first has meant America alone, and that's not a sustainable foreign policy in this fast-moving techno ecosystem of today. So I'm confident we can look to his administration as quickly as possible to fill the many vacancies in America's ambassadorial ranks, especially here in ASEAN. For example, Sung Kim left some time back and you still don't have another ambassador here in the Philippines. And not having an ambassador in Singapore for the entire time of the Trump presidency is foolish as well as inefficient. And I think that Biden will also be a president who understands the value of showing up. And he may be one of the few American presidents to visit Brunei next year during their APEC year. He will have many pressing decisions, which are the results of past administrations' actions, which destroyed but offered nothing to replace the destruction. The WTO reforms need to be addressed. And more urgently, a decision is needed on whether or not to join the consensus on the new Director General of the WTO. I believe that in general, the new administration will prefer to see a more inclusive world where everyone has at least a voice that can be heard. And of course, many of these trade-related decisions will rest on the shoulders of the new president's trade representatives, and we'll all have to wait to see who that is to determine what kind of relationship will exist between the Oval Office and the Winder Building, which is that building across the street from the White House that houses the U.S. trade representative. Well, besides being more international and more inclusive, by nature, Biden is also more open to forming coalitions. 40 plus years in the US Senate will make one quite good at forging compromises. He has taken note of the progress made in the CPTPP, as well as the establishment of the RCEP. And while he's not yet taken a position on joining either one of those organizations, he has clearly said that the US should be helping to write the rules of the new normal in trade and investment. It will take time, but there may be some changes in the wind. I have heard that there are already union leaders and others within the Democratic Party who up to now have been somewhat skeptical about the value of FTAs, but who are taking a somewhat different tack when it comes to the future of trade. Given that America alone may not be sustainable, these trade skeptics are saying that we need to look at what are the constructive economic and social programs that can come out of FTAs. We need to see if we can achieve not just increased market access for companies, but increased well-being of all participants in free trade by utilizing the multilateral trading system. Now, I'm not saying that these folks have been won over, and far from it. I am saying that there are certainly more chances for free trade and American support for the multilateral trading system now than at any time during the past 4 years. And I believe this attitude will eventually help out all trading partners. But let's get a little closer to this particular trading partner, the Philippines. What about an FTA with the Philippines? Well, as I've said elsewhere, the short answer is that this is going to take time. The Biden administration is going to be looking for ways to work with its allies. And again, that includes the Philippines. But relations with our allies, like all of the foreign policy issues and like all administrations newly entering into office, they'll be subject to review and discussion with many stakeholders. So we're going to have to wait and see. And one avenue the Philippines may want to think of is a topic that of many conversations, both public and private these days, would be to look at sectoral agreements. The US has done agreements with Japan that cover mostly agriculture. And similarly, the Phase 1 agreement with China also does the same. Perhaps the Philippines could look at a sectoral agreement, which might at some point grow into an FTA. And if there were one or two other countries that might work together with the Philippines, it might make a more attractive package to come to engage in discussions with the US. And in this regard, more broadly speaking, in order to make sure of your relationship with the new administration during this time of COVID-19, when travel is so uncertain, your embassy in Washington will be even more important than ever. And I have to say, you have an excellent interlocutor in Ambassador Romualdez, and I'm sure that he is going to be one of the greatest assets the Philippines has in order to build a successful and open relationship with the new president and his team. And moreover, I'm sure that the ambassador has already been up on Capitol Hill talking to the congressmen and senators in the US Congress. And I know that he's going to find a very receptive audience there, as the Philippines is a very popular partner among the Congress and the Senator of the United States. All right, so we've got trade war, pandemic, new president. How do these factors affect foreign direct investment in the Philippines? Well, earlier this year, back when we used to be able to get on airplanes, if you can remember that, we went to Vietnam for a business mission in the midst of an expanding trade war between the US and China. And we heard there of Vietnam's success in being chosen as a destination for supply chains that were departing China because of the trade war. Samsung was using Vietnam for almost all of its cell phone production. Apple was beginning to look at Vietnam to house some of its iPhone supply chain, and other high-tech manufacturers were beginning to bid up prices for slots in Vietnamese industrial parks. As time went on and the COVID pandemic became more serious, it was clear that the trade war was not only not going to go away, so the adjustment of supply chains from just in time to just in case would continue, but also that the digital economy, which allowed us to exist virtually, to track and trace infected people, and allow us to use big data to analyze the genetic code of the virus quickly, was here to stay. Digitization was no longer a nice add-on to one's business plan, but a critical tool for competitiveness in the new normal. And sure enough, over the time of the pandemic, Zoom usage has increased over 10 times. Bangalore, a huge international city, its internet traffic doubled, and many internet service companies have seen traffic jump again by 40 to 100%. So pandemic plus trade war show that you need first-rate internet to attract first-rate investment. As the pandemic and the trade war continue, companies are going to need to be able to adjust to rapidly shifting circumstances. So they need maximum flexibility, maximum connectivity, and maximum certainty that those two, flexibility and connectivity, will not be taken away. Current trade agreements do not provide this flexibility and definitely do not provide this much certainty. The WTO and many other trade agreements were written before the invention of the transistor, let alone the cloud. So they all need to be upgraded, and new ways of looking at trade through a digital lens must be found. Today, we have an internet system in China that's closed off from the rest of the world. Russia has its closed system. Europe is tending that way, and even the United States was moving towards that with its America First campaign. So how is business going to go about finding that first-class internet system in a splinter net world? Well, they're going to do so by helping to create that system. Creating the best internet, the best digital regime possible, has a direct bearing on FDI. It's probably the single most important discriminator after market size in determining competitiveness. ASEAN is always in need of investment to fuel economic growth, and in the time of COVID, the need to create jobs and to break out of the pandemic means that competition for investment is getting hotter. Indonesia and Vietnam have created task forces of other organizations that have one goal: to meet companies and attract FDI. We were recently in Thailand, as was mentioned by Dan. In fact, we just finished our business mission there. And just about every Thai ministry with whom we met said they wanted to be able to adjust their regulations and increase the ease of doing business in Thailand according to the needs of their foreign investors. Within ASEAN, you often hear of the EODB, the ease of doing business, and the World Bank doing business indicators as a measure of how reform-minded the government of the day is. Well, these are great ideas and we applaud them, but you may notice that they all have one thing in common, and that is private sector input. The private investment will go where the regulatory system is most business friendly and likely to stay that way. And the best way to make sure that you have the right mix of public-private cooperation is to start from the premise that you will work on getting that agreement before the investment starts. A vibrant private-public dialogue opens avenues to bring more choice to consumers, to introduce them to diversity in everything from food to clothes to entertainment and to where they work. People often ask, why does Vietnam get all the FDI? And the answer is, well, it's both simple and complicated. But whenever I talk to a company that has succeeded in Vietnam, they tell me it's because they were able to work with the government to come to an agreement on the rules of the road before the investment started. And you look again, Singapore was also mentioned in the first speaker's presentation, and Singapore's EDB is another example of how a government has set up a way to work with the private sector to come to these deals, to work together with the private sector. So while we've talked, we have these good examples on attracting FDI on a bilateral basis. And I also talked about the likelihood of an FTA with the Philippines being on hold pending the foreign policy review. But there's another potential strategy that may be of interest, and that is ASEAN integration. I mentioned earlier the possibility of the Philippines looking at a sectoral agreement to be able to set up a small-scale FTA that might later grow into a larger agreement. Well, there is looking at it from the other way around, and that is to help to play that leadership role in ASEAN, pull ASEAN together and promote an ASEAN-US FTA. There's growing sentiment in the US Congress that ASEAN is becoming a more important part of Asia. And I know that that US is going to be looking to do more in Asia, particularly Southeast Asia. And I believe that the Philippines can play a large role in that. And then finally, you might try a hybrid agreement. Just set up a model agreement which does things in the digital space and does things in other sectors. And it can be a pathfinder that you can start out with the Philippines and then add others to that agreement as countries feel themselves ready to join. This was, of course, one of the concepts behind the first TPP. But okay, besides the potential for multilateral or plurilateral FTAs, there are other ways in which the Philippines can use some of its inherent positive points to attract business to come and take another look at the Philippines. And the Philippines has got many of these points. It's going to need to highlight them to distinguish itself from the rest of ASEAN and indeed from the rest of Southeast Asia. Digitization, of course, is an extremely important competitive advantage, as I mentioned earlier, but it also has a corollary that is equally important. Since using digital tools for the most part is less capital intensive than building a factory to pour steel or manufacture goods, digitization is fostering a great democratization of business plans. Whether we're talking about games, and I don't mean gambling games, I mean video games, or big data analysis, or even something that may be as close as you can get to the big manufacturing plants during this digital age, and that is 3D printing. The low cost of entry afforded by digitization means that there's plenty of room for innovation. And the Philippines has tremendous potential to become a very advanced innovator. You may have seen yesterday, if you were attending the meetings here, the slide that DTI Secretary Lopez used in his presentation, which showed the Philippines' performance in the Global Innovation Index rising from 100th position in 2014 to 50th position in 2020. 50 positions in only 6 years in a crucial area. So you're doing something right. So keep it up. There are other indicators which show that the Philippines has great knowledge, creativity, and high-tech savvy. Though again, you're somewhat lagging in that e-participation and trade scale and market size. So the Philippines has many of the correct ingredients and now just needs to be putting it all together. Well, one of the places that's trying to put the pieces together is the Department of Science and Technology here in the Philippines. Recently, the DOST signed a memorandum of understanding with the US ASEAN Business Council to cooperate on innovation programs. The first such program brought together USABC and DOST for a program during the DOST National Science and Technology Week, where they teamed together to present some of their innovation programs. And it's programs like these that will spread the word about the capabilities of the Philippines and that will spread the word about the possibility of joining up with the Philippines to do joint R&D that can bring in investment dollars. Another example is the innovative and creative thinking of Philippine Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Dar, whose vision of taking agriculture to the farmer and using modern technology to move forward and give birth to the next green revolution is continuing to utilize the innovative spirit that made the International Rice Research Institute and its 250 varieties of rice developed solely for Philippine conditions such a hotbed of innovation. Secretary Dar has also signed an MOU with the US ABC, which will be used to continue support from our member companies to support his vision of high-tech agriculture for the Philippine people. So you can see that there's plenty of innovation power to bring business to the Philippines to take another look. Use that power, use the power that is coming from the CREATE Bill and the Public Service Act. These have the potential to provide more liberalization and targeted incentives that the Philippines negotiators can use to craft customized deals with foreign companies that want to come in and do business here. And this, you have to make sure that that internet becomes a first-class asset. So, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the Internet Transactions Bill, and we got to make sure that that's not implemented in a way that makes the internet second or third class rather than the first class asset it needs to be. And finally, the Philippines has got its greatest asset, Filipinos. The Philippine people have tremendous capacity to learn and a great affinity for the internet. It's the greatest texting nation in the world. Upskilling and partnering with many American companies that can help that process can also be a great way to attract foreign direct investment here in the Philippines. So, you know, people have said it before and they'll say it again, and it's always been true. It is more fun in the Philippines. And let's make sure that we can work together to continue that going into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Michalak. We are grateful and honored for you sharing with us that wonderful keynote speech, and also for telling us what are the things that we need to do. Just put together all of the ingredients and we will be able to attract investment. So you talked about digitization, innovation, and most especially the Filipino spirit to bring together FDA into the Philippines in an environment where we have trade wars, pandemic, and an incoming new president. So thank you so much, Ambassador Michalak. And now to introduce our guest speaker and panel entitled Panel 3, Weak Growth Sectors, Agribusiness, Mining, and Tourism. We have with us the Executive Director of the European Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Florian Gottheim.
Thank you very much, Monette. Thank you, Ambassador Michalak, for that truly excellent speech. Our European firms, which are also heavily invested in ASEAN countries, very much appreciate the perspective that you have shared with us. Good morning, everyone. My name is Florian Gottheim, and I serve as the Executive Director of the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. ECCP has about 750 members in Manila and in its chapters in Cebu, Cagayan de Oro, Clark, and Davao, with many of our members actually doing business in the sectors we are covering now in Panel 3. Panel 3 is named Weak Growth Sectors, Agribusiness, Mining, and Tourism. Yesterday, Panel 2 was named Strong Growth Sectors and discussed IT, PPO, creative industries, and manufacturing. All three have been growing strongly in recent years. By contrast, agribusiness and mining have not grown strongly, and looking at certain years, not at all. Every year for a decade at our forum, the JFC urges the Philippines to become an important producer of food, fish, and minerals, both for the domestic and export markets. In fact, mining exports and investments are declining, but there was good news when agriculture grew by 1.6% in 2019. Tourism is different. Last year, it was included with the strong growth sectors. This year, We all know what COVID-19 has done to the sector. It had and still has devastating effects on both domestic and international tourism in the Philippines. But tourism will come back, and bigger and better, because this country has so much to offer. Also, tourism creates a large number of jobs and is not so subject to artificial intelligence and robotics replacing workers. Our speaker for the panel is Undersecretary for Tourism Development, Benito C. Bengson Jr. He will open the panel with remarks on behalf of Secretary Romulo Puyat, who had hoped to speak but informed us that her busy schedule won't allow it. Undersecretary Bong Bengson, with whom we have interacted many times, is a dedicated public servant and premier tourism expert. He has spent most of his professional career with the DoD, much of it promoting the national tourism product. He knows the challenges and solutions for the sector extremely well. After his speech, he will remain and join the panel. The other panelists are each experts in their fields. Mr. Gerard Brimo, Chairman, Chamber of Mines of the Philippines, and Chairman and CEO of Nickel Asia, which operates the largest responsible mining joint ventures in the Philippines with Japan. Ms. Eileen Clemente, one of the authors of our 2019 Tourism Policy Brief and an important partner of Arangkada, and Dr. Rolando Briones, Senior Research Fellow, PIDS, and author of our 2019 Agribusiness Policy Brief. Moderating the panel is Ms. Rizalina Mantaring, Chair of the National Issues Committee of the Management Association of the Philippines. Last year, Riza was president of MAP and graced our forum with an exceptional speech. Also, I would like to alert participants to our midday session options. At noon, we host Mr. Brimo discussing mining and also a panel of 3 experts on tourism, each for 45 minutes. Then at 12:45, we have a panel on agribusiness with Dr. Briones, joined by Mr. Chris Ilagan from Cargill, Philippines, one of the largest foreign investors in the Philippine agribusiness sector. Also at 12:45 are separate videos showing, one on progress of major infrastructure projects and another one on tourism sites in the country. Please register separately for your choices, and you also may register for more than one. The press conference with the Joint Foreign Chamber presidents will begin at 11:30 for 45 minutes and is restricted to media who have registered for it. We extend a warm welcome again to our speaker, panelists, and moderator, and look forward to the discussion of the lessons of our present situation and what we can expect in the future. Undersecretary Bengson, may we please invite you to ascend to the virtual podium for your speech.
Bong, you're on mute.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to read the speech of Tourism Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat. Good day. On behalf of the Philippine Department of Tourism, I am honored and grateful to be a part of the 9th Arangkada Philippine Anniversary Forum. I would like to take this opportunity to speak about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the tourism industry and the Philippine government's efforts and recommendations to attract foreign investment to boost our sector's recovery and revitalization. In the early months of the pandemic, the UN World Tourism Organization estimated that international tourism could decline by up to 80% compared to 2019, putting at least 100 million jobs at risk. It has estimated a loss of 910 billion to 1.2 trillion US dollars in international tourism receipts. Tourism's contribution to the growth of the country's economy cannot be understated. Hence, its recovery is of paramount importance. The Philippine tourism industry comprised 12.7% of the country's gross domestic product in 2019 and generated 5.7 million employment opportunities, or a share of 13.5% to the total employment in the country. The UNWTO expects the rebound in international tourism to occur next year, with most experts pointing to the third quarter of 2021. Others suggest that a significant recovery will only happen in 2022. Travel restrictions are still the main obstacle in the recovery of international tourism, coupled with slow virus containment and the prevailing low consumer confidence. Due to this, we have placed heightened emphasis on the importance of health and safety. In view of the new normal, the DOT and its attached agencies have crafted health and safety guidelines following the recommendations of the World Health Organization and the Department of Health for the reopening of the industry. The guidelines are all geared towards making sure that the industry is well equipped to meet, if not exceed, the health and safety expectations of our tourists. Despite difficulties and challenges endured by tourism industry stakeholders for much of the year, I am proud to say that our Bayanihan spirit is stronger than ever. We are grateful to all who joined hands to uplift those struggling to cope with the pandemic. Not just the government agencies, the private entities, and the tourism industry stakeholders, but every single one of us who helped out even in the smallest of ways. Thanks to everyone pulling together in the same direction, our recovery efforts have begun to take shape and have given us our first true glimpses of hope. In recent months, we've made great progress by reopening some of our prized destinations, including Boracay, Palawan, Baguio, Ilocos Norte, and Ilocos Sur. These destinations have proven that with the strict implementation and observance of health and safety protocols, tourism can successfully restart and once again become a source of revenue and sustainable, gainful employment. While much of our efforts in recent months have been on promoting tourism, we are also building up our momentum to reopen tourism to international markets, starting with our ASEAN neighbors. As a cooperative and productive member of the ASEAN, the Philippines is fully committed to the organization's vision for the tourism industry, which is seen as vital to sustaining the socio-economic growth of ASEAN member states. With a healthy ASEAN tourism sector, we can contribute meaningfully towards regional cultural exchanges, poverty reduction, improved quality of life, and peace and prosperity. As such, we support and stand by the recommendation of the ASEAN member states in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically in the development of the ASEAN Recovery Plan and its importance to the tourism stakeholders of the region. The proposed initiatives fall under the following categories: enhancement and standardization of health and safety protocols for destinations, implementation and expansion of ASEAN digital tourism services and infrastructure, enhancement of ASEAN tourism statistics and information management framework, development of tourism products that are applicable to the new standards being developed that would enhance the ASEAN's competitiveness in the post-pandemic period. The DOT's position on this is that by being aligned with our ASEAN neighbors and partners in this region-wide plan for the tourism industry's recovery, the Philippines strengthens its status as a compelling destination for tourism-related foreign investment. Taking heed of the advice by our ASEAN partners that what needs to be prioritized by national tourism organizations, such as the DOT, we are looking to further accelerate the development of digital tourism, capacity development, and sustainable tourism. Apart from this, we are also considering the following points of the ASEAN Work Plan, which are to intensify promotions and marketing, raise capacity and capability of human capital, implement and expand ASEAN tourism standards for facilities, services, and destinations, implement and expand connectivity and destination infrastructure, upgrade local communities and public-private sector participation in the tourism value chain. Throughout this pandemic, the DOT has valued the inputs of private stakeholders and investors in the tourism industry, especially as we crafted our tourism response and recovery plan, as well as the various DOT formulated recommendations and guidelines in the reopening of our local destinations. In the same vein, we welcome the recommendations of the private sector representatives from the ASEAN member states who shared their perspectives and experiences on the various measures being taken by the tourism sector to cope with to the demands of the crisis. The session was facilitated by Singapore in its capacity as chair of the ASEAN Tourism Marketing Partnership Working Group. The ASEAN Tourism Marketing Strategy of 2021 to 2025 was also taken up in this session. Particular emphasis was given to a consistent and coordinated set of requirements for the entire ASEAN region to guide and facilitate the restart of tourism activities. I would like to share the following suggestions and insights from the private sector representatives, which may prove beneficial to the recovery of tourism in ASEAN. The revival of the ASEAN Pass, an integrated program for facilitating intra-ASEAN travel. For the ASEAN NTOs to consider the costs of the shift to the new paradigm, the markets that require flexibility, and to provide the private sector a detailed and timely advice on the policies to be set in motion. Focus on domestic travel with consideration of ASEAN as a single domestic destination in line with the goals of the ASEAN NTOs in branding Southeast Asia. Support to the destinations that are significantly dependent on international travelers, and prioritization of business travel, then followed by intra-ASEAN MICE as primary products in the short-term recovery phase. After the National Tourism Organization's midterm review of the ASEAN Tourism Strategic Plan, or ATSP 2016 to 2025, the Philippines has recommended several follow-up activities and initiatives, namely, number one, the digitalization of tourism services and enhancement of infrastructure. Number two, identification of target markets that would support the recovery phase post-pandemic and prioritize the ASEAN market in line with the concept of a single domestic destination. And number three, development of tourism products that would be responsive to the new normal standards and would build competitiveness for the post-pandemic period. While recovery might not happen overnight, I believe that the tourism industry has much potential for growth. We hit a record of more than 8 million international arrivals last year, and our domestic tourism numbers were even more impressive, with nearly 110 million trips recorded in 2019. In early 2020, we were already on track to surpass those numbers until the pandemic happened. We've learned valuable lessons from the experience and have set our gaze firmly on the future. We have committed to rebuilding our tourism industry in a slow but sure manner, taking the safety of tourists, stakeholders, and communities as our priority. I can confidently say that our prudent and cautious approach has put us on the right path. With everyone's support and cooperation, we're on the way to a better tourism industry in the new normal, one that is stronger, more inclusive, more sustainable, and more prepared for whatever challenges the future may bring. My sincere gratitude and appreciation once again for the opportunity to address this forum. Thank you and mabuhay. That ends the speech of the Secretary.
Thank you very much, Yusek Bong Bengson, for sharing with us the speech of Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat for that. And indeed, we are very, very much behind you in wanting to ensure that the tourism industry flourishes once more for the Philippines as being a part of that industry. Please do remain on stream, Yusek Bong, to join the panel discussion. Now, to moderate this esteemed panel, may we call on the chair of the National Issues Committee of the Management Association of the Philippines, Ms. Rizalina Mantaring. She will be joined by the chairman of the Chamber of Mines of the Philippines, Mr. Gerard Brimo, and the President and Chairman of Raja Travel Corporation and co-author of the Arangkada Tourism Policy Brief, Ms. Eileen Clemente. And to complete the panel, we have the Corporate Affairs Director of Cargill Philippines and the co-chair of the AmCham Agribusiness Committee, Mr. Christopher Ilagan. Over to you, Ms. Mantaring.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be in this panel this morning. I think we start with the opening statements from our panelists. So may I ask Mr. Brimo to start off, please?
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me here. I am prepared to do a presentation on mining. I've been asked to do a 3-minute talk about mining. Is this the right time for me to do so?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I have 3 slides. I don't know if it will be shown, but if it won't be shown, I can just read through it. Oh, there it is. All right, so I'll be talking exclusively about the large-scale metallic mining, which is copper, gold, silver, and so forth. I won't be touching on non-metallics. And the first point to make is that for such a highly mineralized country that we are, and this is recognized worldwide, the large-scale metallic sector really does not contribute so much to the national economy. We account for over 6% of exports, 0.6% of GDP, 1.2% of total taxes, and about 0.4% of the total workforce. The industry, yes, those of us that are operating continue to operate. Some of us are doing pretty well. But the fact is that the industry is not growing and we are not tapping the mineral resource potential that we have in abundance in this country. The reason for that is because of 2 major policy problems that have stymied the industry's growth. The first is a moratorium on new mining permits until a new mining tax structure is legislated. And this was put in place by the former administration of President Aquino in 2012. So for the last 8 years, if you can imagine, one is not able to get a new mining permit. So therefore, no growth. Second major policy problem is a ban on open pit mining that was put in place by the former DEA secretary in 2017. And I will explain these 2 in the next 2 slides. But going to COVID-19 now, in reality, it's had a minimal effect on the industry because we are 100% export and allowed to continue to operate under certain conditions. Most of us operate in bubbles. A number of us have our own self-contained communities, and we largely operate at remote areas. Yes, we have experienced temporary closures of some mines due to pressure from some LGUs and delays in shipments due to quarantine restrictions. But overall, we did not experience what other industries have experienced. And our exports in the first half of this year was down by only 2% compared to the prior year. So we didn't take a big hit. And we've asked for a realignment of our Social Development Management Fund. In our country, we are obliged to spend 1.5% for social development programs. And the Mines and Geosciences Bureau has agreed that we can realign this. And as of August of this year, the large-scale sector spent, and this is documented, about 380 million pesos in assistance to not only our host communities, but beyond in terms of PPEs, medical supplies. One of our members actually donated a molecular laboratory in Surigao City. So I have to say that the industry has really stepped up quite a bit. And it's another example of the private sector stepping up to help the country during this time of a pandemic. We believe that this has been recognized by government. And lately, there's been a recent recognition by the DENR and the DOF that this industry has to be revitalized to spur economic growth amidst this pandemic and even post-pandemic. I mean, we all know the effect of the pandemic on our economy. It's been a tremendous hit. In the midst of all this, I have to say that the industry has achieved a number of things. In 2016, the various ASEAN mining ministers and secretaries decided to launch the ASEAN Mineral Awards to recognize the best of the best in the industry in the ASEAN region. The first ASEAN Awards was launched in 2017, and the best, a Philippine mine and a Philippine plant won for best practices in sustainable mining. So we can say that the best mine and the best plant in the ASEAN region are actually here in the Philippines. We were also the first country to meet the new 2016 transparency standards of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, or EITI, which is a global standard for transparency in extractives, and it's being implemented in 51 countries. And we were also the first, or the Chamber of Mines was the first association in Asia to adopt the Towards Sustainable Mining program and make it mandatory to our members. This was developed by the Mining Association of Canada. It's rapidly becoming a standard. It's now being implemented in 7 countries. And we've launched that in 2020, this year, in the midst of the pandemic. You can go to the next slide, please. I just have 2 more slides to discuss. And the next slide, please. And just to put these policy problems in perspective, this next slide talks about mining taxes, which is an issue that just never really disappears. So what we've done is in the chamber, we've done this a few years ago, is we've taken a mine model, a copper gold model, and done a life of mine projection. And we've applied the fiscal regimes of various mining countries into this mine model to compute for the average effective tax rate, which represents the tax burden imposed on this particular project. The higher the AETR, of course, the higher the government tax take. So if you look at the chart on the left of the slide, the least tax burden is shown by Peru, followed by Chile, South Africa, Australia, and Canada. And sometimes I get asked, why do you use Peru and Chile in doing this analysis? Who are these countries anyway? The fact is that Peru is number 2 in copper production worldwide and number 5 in total gold production worldwide. And Chile is the number 1 copper producer in the world. So these are 2 very large mineralized countries with very large mining industries. The green bar, MPSA, that is the tax structure now in the Philippines applicable to local companies, 60-40 companies. And you'll see that after the doubling of the excise tax in 2017, we are already more expensive than all these other countries. And on top, the green bar on top is the FTAA. That is a mining permit that's applicable to foreign companies, and that is totally uncompetitive. The red bar is a pending tax bill filed by Congressman Salceda, and we are actually supporting that just to finish this issue once and for all, because the tax imposition imposed under this bill is based on operating margins, and it's applied to income. It's not applied to revenues. A lot of our tax impositions in this industry is applied to revenues, and you pay it whether or not you are profitable. And sometimes we lose money when metal prices are low, and there are hefty tax payments paid on revenues. So we are actually supporting this. Now, if you look at the table on the right-hand side below and talk about taxes, we do have a serious problem in this country. You'll see a table on mining industry statistics prepared by the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, and they come out with this every year. And this goes back to 2010. So a little bit of history here. In 2010, the gross production value of large-scale metallic, the industry that I represent, was 69 billion pesos. And then you'll see small-scale gold mining of 43 billion, and then non-metallics. So small-scale mining at that time was so big that it accounted for 60% of the output of the large scale. There are no taxes paid on this, let alone environmental programs. In 2011, it dropped to 34 billion, and in 2012, it just virtually disappeared. It dropped to 1.2 billion and further down to 0.3 billion in the following year, and it's remained that low. So why did this happen? It happened because also during the time of President Aquino, they sought to impose a 2% excise tax on small-scale gold to the central bank. 2% is not very much, but the small-scale miners didn't like it. And so they stopped selling their gold to the central bank. So not only don't we, and now they haven't stopped mining. In fact, I think probably today the small-scale gold sector is even bigger because the gold price is very high. But the gold has simply disappeared. It's going out through the back door. So a real problem it's not just in terms of taxes, but in terms of capturing the gold output of the country. So on the next slide, and this is my last slide, and I will conclude. So now we go to the second policy problem that has stymied the growth of the industry, which is the open pit ban that was introduced by the former secretary and still remains in place. We are very unique in the mining world because we're the only country that has imposed this. The only other country I know that has a ban on open pit mining is Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a very small country in Central America. There is no mining anyway, and it's known to be a haven for North American tourists and retirees who want to retire in that country. So what you'll see on this chart is the 10 countries with the most number of open pit mines. And we've obtained this data from the US Geological Survey, USGS. And you'll see the United States with close to 2,000 open pit mines, Brazil, China, and Australia, and so forth. We're not here. In fact, today, there are only 2 open pit metallic mines currently operating in the country. The most number of mines that we have in our country are nickel mines. And although that is surface mining, extraction is not by open pit, but it is by contour mining. And we do have a number of quarries. It's been in the press recently that produce non-metallic products, but that is excluded from the ban, presumably because of the need to have these products for the country's build program. Now, there are 3 pending large-scale metallic projects that have been affected by this ban. That is Tampakan, King, and Silangan. They're all located in Mindanao, all located in remote areas, and we all know that Mindanao is crying for projects and for development. And if you look at the table on the right, just these 3 projects alone, never mind projecting what this industry can contribute 20 years down the road, but just these 3 projects alone can contribute $1.8 billion of additional exports, 12 billion pesos of national government revenues or taxes. That is about 50% more of what we're paying today. Local government revenue of 1.5 billion. That is double what we are paying to the local governments today. Social expenses, and this is mandated, every year of 770 million. So you can imagine the social development that can take place in these areas in Mindanao if these projects are allowed to go forward. And IP royalties for the indigenous peoples, because 2 of these projects are in ancestral domain areas and the IPs have given their consent. They want these projects to move ahead. Obviously, because they get a lot of royalties, it's about over 600 million pesos a year. So you can imagine what this can contribute if these policies are reduced. So we hope that, and we know that the DNR and the DOF are now looking at fixing these policies as a way to revitalize our economy as we go through this pandemic and even post-COVID. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Remo. Next, we go to Chris Ilagan. I think you have a presentation to share too.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Riza. Let me try to share that. Please just let me know if it starts coming up on the screen.
Yes, it's on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I know I'm not Dr. Briones, but it really is my honor and pleasure to be here. Spoiler alert, these are more or less the same slides I'll be presenting during the breakout session this afternoon. But I think it would benefit this panel to take a look at what I have prepared for that. I guess, you know, it's probably not the most flattering to be on a panel about weak sectors, but you know, the agriculture sector still remains to be a very important one. I will spend the first couple of minutes just kind of giving you a background of the sector, you know, and how we've performed over the past few years. As we well know, over the past few decades, the Philippine agriculture sector has not kept pace with the growth that we've seen in the industry and services sectors of the economy. This graph on the upper left, you'll note agriculture barely eking out any growth from 2006 to 2019, right? The last time we probably had respectable growth was back in the 2001 to 2005 period. Now, over the years, as you can see in the second graph here, We have seen the share of agriculture to GDP falling to 8.8% from a high in the mid 70s, over 30%. And it's largely due to the, of course, the industrialization of the economy over the years. But quite notable is that decline that agriculture has experienced since then. Now, put that alongside the bottom right chart here, and we do see that there has also been a decline in the employment in the agriculture sector. However, the share of labor, agriculture labor to the total labor market is still quite high at 22.5%. You put that alongside the share of agriculture in GDP, and you can imagine that it's such a small pie that 22.5% is sharing. And that leads us to this other chart on the bottom left here that speaks of the relatively higher poverty incidence that we do find across the agriculture sector versus those that are urban residents. Now, some other trends that we find in the Philippine agriculture sector, and most of these were highlighted in the policy brief that we came out with in the Arangkada project last year. We're still highly import dependent. I know that one of our objectives have always been around self-sufficiency, but as you can see, there are very few subsectors. Here you can probably see duck and tilapia. This is as of 2018 from Department of Agriculture, where we have more or less self-sufficiency. But in the others, our staple rice, for example, we do still have a reliance on imports at only 86.17% self-sufficiency, right? We do see better numbers around chicken and to an extent pork, right? But that having been said, we do rely heavily still on international trade flows to fill in the gaps that we have locally. We've also seen in the bottom left corner, it says figure 4 there, that the Philippines among regional peers, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam, our agriculture exports have been very low and barely growing versus these other countries, that have been able to really, by leaps and bounds, see a great increase in their agricultural exports to the world. Another trend here is around employment. As mentioned earlier, we've seen that decline in agriculture employment. Interestingly enough, I think now our number of workers in 2019, 2020 is about 9.7 million. So that number continues to decline. We do see an increase in output per worker, but that's largely a function of a denominator that is shrinking, no? And in terms of GVA growth in the agriculture sector, you can see that over the years, and particularly in the 2010s, the Philippines versus other regional peers has not been able to keep pace with the growth in these other countries. Just to give you a sense of where the local growth is coming from, you'll see in the bottom table 3, it's largely poultry and livestock that are pulling the sector up. Together, I think they make up about 25% of the agriculture sector. Right, and these are the two sectors probably driven by an increased desire or preference for a more balanced diet and meat proteins in that diet is what's driving this sort of shifting this shifting makeup of the agriculture sector. Now, in the face of COVID, food security has become a central priority. We all know that. And interestingly enough, it was the agriculture sector that actually was able to pull through with a slight positive growth in Q2 and Q3, right, at 1.6 and 1.2% respectively. That actually has increased the share of agriculture to GDP from that 8.8% figure you saw in 2019 to about 10% this year. And you know, I guess it bodes well. Partially probably due to some of us getting into urban agriculture, the plantitos and plantitas, I know have really sprung out, no? And hopefully that's a momentum we can continue to build on right, to ensure the food security of the country. We also see that the agriculture sector has received its largest budget in its history at 86 billion, again showing that that food security is indeed a priority, especially in a post-COVID-19 or the post-COVID-19 recovery phase. And I share here the VAPI-VOPI September figures. I just wanted to highlight here that you can see among the gainers is food manufacturing. And the beverages, though negative, is a slight negative at negative 3.4%. So certainly food and beverage has a key role in jumpstarting the economy that we find ourselves in today. Some other emerging trends affecting the agriculture sector, some of this due to COVID-19, others due to other factors. We, of course, know food security and self-sufficiency agenda remain priorities during this time. Of course, there's a renewed interest from the general public wanting to know where their food comes from, in some of them actually growing their own food or going directly to the producers to get their own food. We do see some growing protectionism that is emerging actually in the world that we face. I believe Ambassador Mike touched on that a little bit and the threats that the risks that come with that. We also see as a response, largely due to COVID-19, the shortening and localization of supply chains. As supply chains had broken down in the early part of the COVID-19 pandemic, many realized that they had to ensure that their supply chains were a bit more reliable, probably a bit more diversified, and a lot closer to home. We also see the rise of e-commerce, a lot of people doing their shopping online, including for food and beverage products. We see an evolution in terms of food preferences, largely moving towards the health and nutrition aspects of food consumption. We also face a multitude of animal and plant disease. Probably the most commonly known one these days is the African swine fever affecting our entire swine sector. We, of course, have climate change, and the recent typhoons are testament to the threats that come with that and the impacts it will have and it can have on our food supplies. Of course, now we also, in the context of COVID, there's been a rise in hunger. And more, we start seeing the need to ensure that our food security program is one that will also address the rising hunger that we've experienced during this COVID-19 pandemic. We do see the Department of Agriculture under the leadership of Secretary Dar adopting a new way of thinking, and this new way of thinking is captured in these eight points. Right? We see modernization, consolidation, industrialization, export promotion, infra development, higher budgets, legislative support, and roadmap development as his initial 8-point agenda when he took on the role of secretary. Since then, they have expounded on that 8 paradigms and have put together this food security framework, whose ultimate vision is a food secure and resilient Philippines with prosperous farmers and fisher folk. You see here that the objectives are largely around production and availability, accessibility and affordability, price stability, sustainability, and food safety. And the key strategies to be able to meet these objectives and that vision are around farm consolidation, modernization, industrialization, export promotion, and infrastructure development. And the only reason why I wanted to share that is because in our policy brief last year, we did identify some recommendations that the agribusiness sector, we would hope the agribusiness sector would consider. Right? And some of the key challenges we raised were around market access to finance, land market restrictions, and the infrastructure gap. Now, when it comes to market access, our recommendations include obviously, and this has been talked about quite a bit today, the ease of doing business implementation. And in the context of agriculture, you're looking at the agencies such as the Bureau of Animal Industry, the Bureau of Plant Industry, the FDA being able to release permits, licenses, streamlining their processes to make it easier to do business in this sector. There are, of course, another recommendation we had was strong investment incentives. And it's nice to note in the recently passed CREATE bill, for those investments outside of urban areas and those in agriculture were given special additional incentives for the sector that we're in. Another recommendation we had was the removal of investment restrictions. And of course, we cite here the amendments to the PSA, the Retail Trade Law, the Foreign Investments Act. We also included the amendment to the Rice and Corn Law, which places restrictions on foreign investors in the rice and corn sectors. Logistics, telecoms, distribution, infrastructure, R&D investment, extension services, overhaul and modernization, and new trade arrangements. For more details on this, please do catch us in our breakout session at 12:45, where we can expound on this. On access to finance, it's largely around making the finance strategy a bit more inclusive, and that would include particularly expanding the insurance coverage for farmers, not just to cover crops, but to cover livestock and poultry, as well as to increase the penetration rate. Right now, it's only about 18% of our farmers that have insurance coverage, right? And then the shifting the stick to carrot strategy in ag finance, largely on the agri-agra law, right? Incentivizing banks to lend to this sector rather than penalizing for not being able to meet certain thresholds. On land market restrictions, one of the key issues that has really been one of the issues of the sector has really been the fragmentation of our agricultural lands. And so some of the recommendations we have around this are on the subdivision of the CLOAs, the lifting the transfer and ownership restrictions on the lands that were distributed under CARP, consolidation of farm operations through the likes of block farming, cooperative farming, and the likes. And finally, on the infrastructure gap, really keeping the private sector, diverting private sector investments into private infra goods. And here we talk about cold storage, post-harvest facilities, and food terminals, which can largely be, these naturally, they are private goods in a sense and private infrastructure. And we feel that private sector investments would make more sense there rather than the government doing that. And then for the government to focus on those that really have more of a public nature. And these are farm to market roads, irrigation facilities, R&D, and the likes. So, with that, I'll save the rest of this for the breakout session, but back to you, Riza. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And last presenter would be Ms. Clemente. Ms. Clemente.
Good morning. Yes, good morning. I'm just waiting for the sharing. Okay. So I just want to tell you about the tourism policy brief that we didn't expect that the policy brief would be facing the COVID pandemic, but it was done prior to, and all the pandemic did is to accelerate these things that we have written before, especially when it comes to data integration and sharing, the resource management, and destination stewardship. So with that, I would just like to say that a lot of lawmakers have ruled the tourism industry out and have even put us in the sunset industry. So by the time that we were asking for some budget for assistance, not a lot of people put their eggs in the tourism basket, so to speak. But tourism doesn't go away. It actually just mutates in the way that we offer tourism. In fact, the pent-up demand for travel will give us a V-shaped recovery rather than a U-shaped recovery, as predicted even by the World Travel and Tourism Council. Here, it just shows you the changes of travel restrictions over time. And out of the world, 115 countries are already moving towards opening their borders. So we started at 72%, where every border was almost closed and not a lot of movement has happened. And now we're down to 43, and 30% of those are only now just partial closures. And the rest have just put several travel restrictions. So if you will look at the movement from April to September, this is already showing us that the borders are slowly opening. The government agencies, for us to move forward, the government agencies have to acknowledge the potential of the tourism industry. And that's the first. And in doing so, it should ensure the harmonization of efforts to open up. It is because the implementation is not harmonized that we will shoot ourselves on the foot, and you will have no one to blame but ourselves for having a U-shaped recovery. So it is very, very important that we really need to make sure that we have a harmonized implementation towards opening. Also, apart from providing all the tax breaks, the industry also has to be pushed like never before to change and be more dynamic and adapt to thrive, not to survive. All of us also look at the past and learn our lessons if we are able to move forward. The world has recovered from outbreaks 10 to 19 months from the start of the outbreak. And it is only a terrorist activity, the 9/11, where it took us about 2 years. But the only reason it took us 2 years, again, was because the world was not consolidated in how to open up the borders during that security threat. So what we now want to see for the first time is that the World Travel and Tourism Council and other organizations like IATA, CLIA, and other governments are working together, collaborating to ensure that there are globally accepted protocols and practices. And even on testing, the WTTC is also endorsing the use of the antigen testing that is worth only $7, and it takes 15 seconds to get the results. No? So that will come out soon. But bottom line, we just really have to be more positive and amplify the positive news. Here, as I said, 115 countries have eased already on COVID-19 related restrictions. Also, with that, and plus even our government adopting the safe travels of the World Travel and Tourism Council, we are sure to be one of those that should be able to open up faster, only if we are harmonized in the different LGUs as well. This is what I was saying about the need to learn from the past, where if you will look at the disasters and outbreaks, it takes 10 to 19 months for full recovery, but it doesn't mean that it can't start recovering faster. And the last positive news that I want to share is that air travel, we want to be able to amplify this message that 1.2 billion passengers have traveled in 2020, and there are only 44 confirmed cases. That's 1 in 27 million. That's because the atmosphere in the cabin is so pure that it's similar to a hospital operating theater. And all the air introduced in the cabin is sterile, and it changes every 2 to 3 minutes, 8 times more than necessary. So if there's a safe way to travel, air travel would be the one. This plus the fact that we are implementing all the protocols, which means that the chance of getting COVID when you are traveling is fully enforced and will even mitigate the risk of the cases. We also just want to say that the countries that are already open up include Greece, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Portugal, the Caribbean, etc. Air corridors in Asia have also begun between Hong Kong and Singapore, and definitely the Tokyo Olympics will happen in 2021. So I just wanted to share all of these positive news for us to move forward. And the rest of my slide will be made available also in the breakout session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eileen. Okay, we'll start our panel discussion now. I'll be going around asking a couple of questions for each sector, and then maybe we have a more general discussion. So it's interesting that we have 3 sectors here which are deemed to be weak sectors at the moment, but they actually have huge potential to be strong sectors. In fact, I recall a few years ago when we were looking at what the next growth engines of the Philippines would be, because the twin legs or the BPOs and the the OFW remittances, we said aren't going to last forever. Mining and tourism were the top two that were on the list of our investment managers that were the next growth sectors for the Philippines. So maybe we can discuss a little more of why it didn't happen and what can be done to improve that further. So maybe asking first you, Sec Bong, one of the deterrents right now, by the way, obviously is the fear of traveling. And I'm glad that you're really emphasizing safety, because even prior to the pandemic, that was the top concern of travelers' safety. But one of the big deterrents now to even domestic travel is the different rules of the LGUs on what's required before you can travel there, whether you can get tested before, after, whether you quarantine 14 days, 3 days. What's being done by the DOT to try to help harmonize that so that we can encourage further travel locally?
Thank you, Risa. We've had very lengthy discussions over the last couple of days on the matter of standardizing the protocols and requirements at the different destinations that have opened up. I think at the outset, what we have to say is that we respect the decisions that are made by the local executives. They know the situations better than those of us. But we also realize that for domestic tourism to really get moving, we have to make it easier for the travelers. And this includes coming up with clearer guidelines, standard guidelines with respect to the protocol. So we will be meeting with the LGUs, at least for those destinations that have opened up, and we'll come up with our recommendations on how to standardize the requirements, particularly with respect to the testing. I think with respect to filling up the health declaration form and showing your confirmed booking at the DOT accredited establishment, I think that's easy enough. It's really on the matter of testing that's a little bit tricky. But yeah, we're working on it, and this is something that we hope to standardize in the next couple of weeks.
And on the issue of integrating across and making it easier for the traveling to go through, I think one of the things that would help is if you didn't have to fill out health declaration forms over and over again and have a system, for example, of using Stay Safe or whatever app you want to use nationally. And I'm wondering where the government is on the efforts to have a single system so that travelers can pass, because again, that was among the top concerns of travelers, seamless travel even prior to the pandemic.
At the national level, we have an app that will tell you which destinations have opened and what the requirements are. You can go to philippines.travel/safe-trip. We also have another app which is called the Philippine Travel App, which will provide information on the destinations in general and the DOT accredited establishments. But understand what you're saying, because right now the different provinces have their own booking platforms. If you're talking about Baguio, you have to go to Visita Baguio. If it's Ilocos Norte, you have to go to Ilocos Norte. .ph, if it's Coron, visit Coron, etc. So the idea is really to integrate it so that as the tourist moves from one destination to another, he doesn't have to re-encode the information that he had done previously. And more importantly, to make sure that requirements, especially when it comes to the test results, are all standard and all made clear, before the start of the travel.
Yeah, that would be really welcome. I think it would encourage more people to travel. I guess I have one more question before I move on to mining and then go around again. Your expectation is that tourism is unlikely to recover until late 2021 or 2022. But meanwhile, you have the whole tourism infrastructure, you have the workforce, you have the hotels. I'm wondering what type of support the government is providing. And maybe Eileen can also mention what type of support do you feel that you need to be able to survive until the industry starts to recover?
Let me clarify first the prediction that I mentioned earlier. That came from the United Nations World Tourism Organization. It's not a DOT projection because we realize that the situation is still very fluid and it's really difficult to come up with any timeline as to when we can go back to pre-COVID levels. But in terms of assistance to our stakeholders, under the Bayanihan 2 Act, there's a total of 6 billion pesos that will be that has been allocated to help our tourism enterprises by way of working capital loans. And the terms and conditions are very attractive. Zero interest, no collateral. You just have to pay a service fee of for the full loan term of 8 years, 4 years rather, you pay about 8%, so that only comes out to about 2% per annum. So the facility is there. It's being administered by the Small Business Corporation of the Department of Trade and Industry. So we're hoping that the tourism enterprises can avail themselves of this loan. There's also another 3.1 billion pesos allocated also under Bayanihan 2 that will help displaced tourism workers. And this is being implemented together with the Department of Labor and Industry. And part of that 3.1 billion will also include 100 million pesos specifically to help regional and community tour guides who have been displaced because of the pandemic. So these are just some of the specific forms of assistance that we're giving to our tourism partners.
Thank you. Eileen, maybe you'd like to also mention what else do you need that maybe we haven't covered.
Yeah, Yusek Bong already mentioned those that are important to keep us alive, no? But most importantly, we really need to make sure, again, as I mentioned, the harmonization of implementation, which has already also been discussed, but also to amplify the good messages, because I am sure the LGUs are not really that aware on the data that we have globally, and also on the side of, as I mentioned a while ago, the purified air on board the airplane. And in a non-contiguous area like the Philippines, the only way to really get across fast enough is by planes. So we have to make sure that the messages on how it is safe to travel is amplified in that manner by showing real data. So we really have to focus on all of those so that the LGUs may also be aware on how to implement properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move on now to mining, to Mr. Brimo. No, it really struck me reading about mining that we actually have the 5th highest mineral resources in the world, and would be in the top 10 in terms of attractiveness as potential, because of potential, but they're in the bottom 10 in terms of attractiveness for investment. This came from a study of the Fraser Institute of Canada, so in the policy brief of Arangkada. So, there were reasons cited for why, and you alluded to policy problems which needed to be fixed. What key reforms would you prioritize if it were up to you? Maybe a couple, 2, 3 key reforms that you feel would help really mining take off.
Thanks, Risa. But can I first of all say that large-scale mining, to begin with, does not compete with agriculture or with tourism. I think I have to put this out there because you do hear about this, that mining can affect food security, and that's really far from the truth. Where we operate in mineral lands that are not conducive to agriculture at all. If you look at the nickel mines in Surigao, I mean, you'll see entire mountain ranges going from Surigao Norte to Surigao Sur with all of this red earth, which is lateritic soil. It's soil full of iron. There's not even a forest there because the soil lacks nutrients, and not to mention agriculture. In fact, on the contrary, what we tend to do is we tend to support agriculture in areas where we operate because we need to develop the local communities. It's part of our mandate. We're obliged to spend money for that. One example is in one of our mines in southern Palawan, away from the lateritic soil, we discovered that the area was conducive to grow coffee, and we set up or organized 8 cooperatives involving 8 barangays. And what we have there now is quite a large coffee plantation. And this is part of the livelihood projects that we do that we give to our host community. So we don't compete with agriculture, much less with tourism. None of us would be stupid enough to set up a mine in El Nido, or places like that, assuming we could in the first place. In fact, one of our mines has actually become a tourist spot because we've grown, it's a 50-year-old mine, and we've grown lush forests now, and it's become very biodiverse. So we set up a tourist area there, and it's been attracting quite a lot of visitors to see how it's done and so forth. So what's happened with mining in our country is a number of things. I'll now address what you were saying. Historically, we have a history of unrehabilitated mines. Yeah, that's number one. Our laws in the past did not call for mine rehabilitation. You mine an area, it's finished, you leave, abandon it. This is the case in the Philippines as it is all over the mining world. And of course, as we moved ahead and progressed, our laws have changed here in this country as it has in other countries. So in our new 1995 Mining Act, rehabilitation is mandated. You can't abandon a mine. You're on the hook legally for at least 10 years after mining is finished in order to ensure that the area is rehabilitated. And in this noontime breakout session, I'll show some examples of that. But unfortunately, we have a hard time in moving forward because we also have very active NGOs that like to pick on this industry, and they like to remind everyone that we have this history in this country, although that is in the past and cannot happen again. So that's number one. We also had, unfortunately, a former DENR secretary that was just simply against the industry. And I knew her personally, even before she became a secretary. And unfortunately, I was not able to convince her that there's a number of good things that can come out of this industry. As you know, she's passed away, and may she rest in peace. And I don't want to criticize her too much because of that. But you can imagine that during her time, she mandated audits of all operating mining companies. And 20 plus mining companies supposedly failed the audit and were given closure orders, were ordered to close. And that made a lot of press. Of course, when you legally, if you're served with that order, you can appeal. And on appeal, you can continue to operate. So they are still operating and pending appeal. Now, what's happened since then is that under the new secretary, under the auspices of the Mining Minerals Industry Coordinating Council, or MICC, which is composed of the DNR, DOF, DTI, and so forth. A number of government agencies are part of the Mineral Industry Coordinating Council. They decided to embark on new audits to get to the real truth of these audits that were done by the former secretary. And out of those 26, I think it was 26 or 28 mines that were served with closure orders, only 3 failed the audit to the point where they should not operate. So you see what a different picture between the former and the present. But all of that has portrayed the industry as frankly being very bad. And it's put all of us on the defensive, and that's why it's hard to change the policies that I've talked about. The moratorium on new mining permits until taxes are increased. And I've already shown in that chart that we're already paying quite a high tax burden to the point where we're almost now uncompetitive with other mining countries. And also the open pit ban, which is in some ways an emotional issue because nobody wants to see holes in the ground. Although those holes can be rehabilitated as we're doing here and in other countries. So the industry has been hit by these factors and it's going to take some time to correct. But on the other hand, there is growing realization, as I mentioned, by government, that we are in trouble economically in this country because of the pandemic. And this is one industry that can really contribute and rather quickly. And I've shown 3 pending projects that if you were to lift the open pit ban, because they all have their permits in place, except for that one pending policy, I mean, the contribution is immense. And we're just talking about 3 projects. We're not talking about the trillions of dollars of mineral resources that we supposedly have in this country. Just 3 projects alone can really develop those areas in Mindanao that is really crying out for development because they really don't they don't see much development in those areas at all. And so we hope that government, and they are reviewing these.
Yeah.
We hope that something good will come out of it.
So I have two questions of picking up from what you said. One is for open pit mining. Now, there's been a lot said about the damage to the environment, the groundwater contamination, and so on. How can you reassure the public and the communities around you that you can do it safely and responsibly? And secondly, given the background, everything you've said, the 78% effective tax, even when with the new bill, why would anyone want to invest here? And why would a foreign company want to invest here, given that they know they're facing all those obstacles, plus a 78% tax? It's high risk, high capital, your industry, right? So why would I want to risk all of that for so little return?
It's hard enough. It's hard enough even for Filipinos like ourselves to
Yeah.
invest in the industry. You mentioned the Fraser Institute, right?
Yes.
And in a slide that I have for the noontime session, I show the results of the 2018 survey on policy perception on mining and investment attractiveness in mining. And the Fraser Institute is followed by every single large mining company around the world. They do these annual surveys and so forth. And the reason why I don't show the 2019 survey is because the Philippines is not there. It's disappeared. We're at the bottom in the 2018 survey. But the way that the Fraser Institute works is that if they don't get responses from at least 5 of the 2,000 companies and executives that they go to for the survey, they don't show the results. So the short of it is that we are not in the radar map anymore for mining investments, for foreign mining investments. We've disappeared from the radar screen precisely because the policies and the conditions are so difficult in order to attract mining investments. The tax burden is high, but if the conditions are right, it's not woefully uncompetitive yet. And we hope it doesn't get to that point. So if the Salceda bill passes, that's something we can live with. But if it gets any worse, then the game is up. I mean, you really won't see, and it's such a shame because we are so mineralized. We can contribute substantially more. I mean, it's amazing when I bring people to some of our mines and they see the development that has taken place there. And I brought the former DE and our secretary to one of our mines, and she saw our schools where we educate over 1,000 kids for free. She saw our indigenous learning system because we have a lot of IPs around us, and we educate 1,400 IP kids for free. And they can actually get the high school equivalent out of these schools that we fund. Not to mention our hospital. We're the only hospital in that area of Palawan. This is all the way in the south. And she was amazed. And you know, we like to say in our industry that if we can only attract people to come and see the large-scale mines that are operating, it can change things around. But it's very hard to do. And we try some of that. But those that come go away really impressed. So that's why we are in the situation where we are. That we hope it can change because it's sayang for the country, you know? It's really a huge lost opportunity. And I don't think there's any other country that I can think of that has turned its back on the development of minerals. And it is not, by the way, a sunset industry. If we want a green economy, if we want renewable energy, if we want electric vehicles, because that's the trend in the next 10, 20 years, you need a lot of minerals for that. Copper, nickel, cobalt, and so on and so forth. It is not by any stretch of the imagination a sunset industry.
So I guess you just have to show people that you really can operate responsibly and take care of the environment while mining.
Well, that's one of the reasons, sorry, Risa, that's one of the reasons why we're implementing the Towards Sustainable Mining program that we're adopting from the Mining Association of Canada. Because that's going to be published in the Chamber website, and you can see the results of that, and there will be auditors and so forth to pass judgment on the kind of programs that we have.
Thank you. We move on to Chris. Okay. You know, agriculture is interesting for the Philippines because a quarter of the labor force is actually in agriculture. And yet the as you said, very weak growth. In fact, that weak growth goes over the last 4 decades, where the growth in agriculture has only been 1.9% on the average, brief spurts in some years and then down again. Whereas our neighbors are growing much faster, China, Vietnam, and so on. So there's really very little growth. And if you were to look at, I know you mentioned some challenges. If you were to pick out what are the key issues that have really held us back for the last 4 decades, what would you pick on as, if these are the 2 or 3 biggest things that have resulted in the situation we're in now, where we're not growing basically?
Thank you, Riza. Probably one that seems to be a theme of both Secretary Dar's new thinking as well as the way Arangkada, the policy brief, presented it. No, would probably be one around consolidation of lands. No, well, right now it's more of the fragmentation of the land market. No, in many instances these are passed down generation to generation, from I think as high as maybe 3, even 5 hectares plots. These are now down to closer to 1. And of course, with when you fragment the market like that, and there's no way for them to work closer together and build the scale that you need for more efficient operations, you will end up having inefficient operation. And then that, I think, is probably one. Probably, another one that they say is always an issue, but I think it's less so. World Bank kind of helped us see through that issue was on the aging population. They say the average age of the farmer is 57, but in the recent World Bank report, it's closer to 40, right? I think though that maybe one of the other issues that might, kind of that has held us back really is a large focus on our staple, which is rice. No? So a lot of the investments have gone into rice without much, productivity improvement to show for it. No? And and when the other countries are growing on the backs of higher value products, fruits, livestock, poultry. Unfortunately, what keeps us back, our uncompetitiveness, comes from very high input costs, and these input costs are driven through poor logistics and what have you. So it goes back to our discussion on how do you improve the business environment. And so certainly in the area of infrastructure and bringing down logistic costs will probably go a long way in improving our competitiveness in the ag sector. No? So it's the fragmented market, expensive input costs, the weak infrastructure to support, that I think would probably be some of the key issues and challenges that face the sector and have held us back. I think another one really is, there hasn't been a very clear roadmap of where we want to focus the efforts. And in the absence of that, we end up focusing on rice, which we know we have not, despite the technologies we've offered to the world to improve the productivity elsewhere, we haven't been able to fully adopt ourselves, unfortunately. And I think that has held us back as well.
So if we talk about fragmentation, and many people blame that on CARP, that has resulted in the average size of farms being 1 hectare, which is just not sustainable if you look at the modern farming methods, right? Is it time for new, amendments to CARP, or is that politically not feasible? Or are there other by which you can consolidate farms?
Yeah, no, it is a politically charged debate, no? They're probably, in Congress, for example, right now they're looking at least increasing the allowable ownership hectareage limits, right? Right now it's at 5. I understand there's a bill by Congressman Salceda to bring that to 25. So when it comes to, let's say companies like Cargill or other agribusiness companies that need more tonnage and need that scale, right? It becomes easier than having to deal with thousands of farmers, maybe just a handful instead that have larger plots of lands, and that certainly might be one way to support the market. I think there have been some success stories also in the agriculture sector insofar as consolidated farm operations. the likes of Dole, Del Monte. You know, you have basically the big tenant, small landowner sort of setup there, big brother, small brother setups. That work, no? But oftentimes it does require a lot of effort to make sure that these different farm owners, these farmland owners that are possibly smallholders, right, are able to get their act together. And oftentimes, you know, what we've seen in some instances, as much as we like working with cooperatives, the in-house fighting of cooperatives becomes an issue that we will have to contend with, no? And so being able to break probably those sorts of barriers, right, and really develop the communities, the co-ops that can engage professionally with larger businesses is one way that we can, you know, work around the limitations around the current land market that we find ourselves in today.
Yeah. Maybe just a last question for you. You talked about the high input costs, and one of that is the cost of labor. I find it a bit ironic that our farmers are our poorest sector, and yet supposedly their effective wages already doubled over the last few years, so that the input costs for all our other industries, for food manufacturing and so on, are higher, and we become less competitive all the way down the chain. How would you address something like this, where they're actually, you know, they're actually poor? I mean, not they don't have enough for their daily needs, and yet the costs are too high already, as to add to the input costs.
Yeah, so I guess I can give one example, and for me the quick answer is more around the lines of inclusive business. No? How do you integrate the farmers into the larger supply chains, both locally and globally? And one way that we've been able to do that, although it is a company effort in Cargill's, you know, we work with coconut farmers. They say that coconut farmers are the poorest of the farmers out there, no? And what we've done, we of course put them through a training, no? To manage their farms as businessmen, as well as to teach them the good agriculture practices and produce in the process sustainable products. No? And because of that, because we were able to certify them, they are now able to receive actually a premium over market, because the products that they produce for us are of higher quality, and there is a growing market for sustainable products abroad. No? We actually export most of the coconut oil we make locally to global markets. I think that, you know, what that does, it does connect directly the producer and the consumer. In our case, we're the consumer. I think more of those sorts of arrangements, perhaps done at a larger scale, can go a long way in improving livelihoods without necessarily improving the actual cost of the good, because you're basically cutting that middle portion, right? And I think that we're trying to move more towards that, right? At the same time, though, it's understandable the middleman actually still plays a crucial role in linking the markets today, right? But if we can move more of these co-ops into more professionalized organizations that can deal directly with the larger businesses who are more connected to the global supply chains, that I think is probably a more sustainable way of doing it. Of course, you create then the scale. That scale should, in theory, help you reduce your input costs and allow for a bit more competitive market, no, in the different sectors of agriculture. So there, thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I think running through all your comments are the need for better infrastructure, modernization, digitalization, and so on, and perhaps enabling those. Maybe for a last question for all of you, because the objective of this conference is really foreign direct investments. How do we increase it? For each of your sectors, why should somebody from overseas invest here in the Philippines? And in what specific areas in your sectors can they actually participate, given, for example, our restrictions on land ownership? What specific areas? So how would you make a pitch? Why should they come to the Philippines, and where specifically should they invest? Maybe you can start with you, Sec Bom.
Well, thank you. I think I'll start with a bit of historical perspective. Up until 2020, tourism has performed consistently well in terms of revenue, employment, contribution to GDP. The resources are there, the assets are there, and I'm confident that we will be able to hurdle this challenge as we've done the past challenges that came our way. Tourism generated about 3.5 trillion pesos last year, of which, and I have to emphasize this, of which 3.1 trillion pesos came from domestic tourism. So I mention this because even with the difficult times, you can count on the very strong domestic tourism base to tide us over. While borders are still entry to border, while there are still border restrictions, there's still a lot of opportunities for domestic travel. And this is something that I think foreign investors ought to take a look at. If you're talking of 110 million domestic trips taken in 2019, revenue of 3.1 trillion pesos, the opportunities are enormous. Now, in terms of specific areas, we have identified what we call tourism enterprise zones. These are integrated areas where investors can come in, put up the superstructures, and government basically provides the infrastructure. So there's a lot of opportunities in the accommodation sector, certain types of services. And I think overall, the Philippines remains an attractive destination for tourism investments.
You. About for mining, Mr. Remo.
Years ago, you had maybe about 10 or 15 very large and responsible foreign mining companies that have set up offices here to do exploration. These are the kind of investors we want to attract. The big companies that have considerable technical know-how, and they're very responsible, and they operate in so many other parts of the country, of the world, sorry. But today, they're almost all gone. They realize how difficult it is, and they realize that policies can change overnight, and there's nothing more devastating for foreign investors than policies that change and goes against them in the middle of the game. And that's what's happened to our industry. It will take a long time to attract them back, even if we fix our policies, and I hope we can fix them soon, because we're not a wealthy country, right? We all know this. We should take advantage of every single resource that we have in our country to move our country forward. Agriculture is one of them, obviously. Tourism is one of them too, and that's very clear. We have some very beautiful and pristine areas in our country. And we have minerals. All of these things should go hand in hand, IT sector and so on and so forth. And the only way to move our country forward is really for us to take advantage of what we have. And not exclude any particular sector because of history or misunderstandings or so forth. So if you ask me if we can attract foreign investors soon on mining, I would say it's very hard. It'll take some years. You might have some isolated foreign investors, sure, but not the way that we saw them coming in some 20 or 30 years ago, or even more. That's not going to happen for some time, unfortunately. That's the short of it, Isa.
Thank you. Chris, what would attract them, and where can they participate in agribusiness?
Yeah, well, certainly, we're taking off from Cargill, no? We see the Philippines as a potential, as a growth market in our Asian portfolio, and 3 reasons why. One is around natural resources. Obviously, I mean, I was talking about coconut oil earlier. We are the 2nd largest coconut producer in the world. That's natural for us, therefore, to be here to service that global market. The domestic market also has a lot to offer. At almost 110 million people, with a median age of mid-20s, right? And a growing middle class. All of these are good reasons to come in. All of this wealthier country, right? This wealthier population is going to eat more, and they want more diversified diets as well, and that will certainly be a key reason why any foreign investor in the food and ag sector might want to consider the Philippines just for its own domestic market. And I think the third one really is, at least in recent years, you see maybe the last decade, a real move towards opening up the economy for business. And you see this in economic reforms, the rice tarification law, right? The Philippine competition law, right? And then these moves around PSA, the Foreign Investments Act. All of those are, signs, credible signs that the country is really geared towards, attracting investments, particularly in the agriculture sector. Certainly, I said earlier, the protein market right now, it's in a glut because of COVID-19, as well as the African swine fever, but the protein market is bound to grow. And you can see that we still heavily rely on imports in that regard. So, being able to domestically produce swine, poultry, beef, right, are certainly areas for continued investment. I mentioned this a bit earlier around post-harvest facilities. That a lot of crop losses are due to just having poor warehouses and the likes. Cold storage is another one. Again, as protein grows, you need more freezers to keep your stocks and inventory in, right? Then we have certain niche products that the world is demanding for, and high value crops such as coffee, cacao are certainly areas, and it's a global market that needs to be served. Right, so there are probably many more, but these are the ones that come to mind as potential areas for foreign investors. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eileen, you're in a you have a travel company. So how would you promote the Philippines to foreigners, and how do you tell them come to the Philippines? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, the Philippines has its natural assets already. That is what the new normal or the next normal wants, no? For example, air ventilation. We are in the beaches. We have all the coastlines that you can have. So in fact, this is the most ideal place to go because we're already on the coastlines. The ventilation is good and all of that. But if I can go back to the question of investment, it's not just about these places, no, but also in the equipments that we use. In the 70s and 80s, there used to be like a lot bidding, meaning the different stakeholders, by leveraging what they all need, they are able to give it to BOI, and BOI is able to send out like an RFP. It wasn't called an RFP then, but in that manner, you're leveraging the volume in order for you to be able to purchase all these different equipments for the different hotels, different enterprises, so that when they buy as a whole, it becomes lower. So that's another form of investment that I want the DOT again to re-explore.
Okay, that's a good point. I'll ask the last question from the audience. The question is, has the inability to own land in the Philippines been a deterrent to investors in choosing a country in which to invest? And if you can, maybe all of you can pick that up. Has it been a deterrent, do you think, the lack of ability to own land?
I can start. I think I kind of addressed it a bit earlier, but it hasn't. I mean, it hasn't for the likes of like an agribusiness company like Cargill. It hasn't stopped us from coming in. I think that there are ownership restrictions that kind of make it a bit more difficult to operate. And so, for example, the fact that you can only own 5 hectares of land, right, tells you that the ability of the private sector, right, the market to allocate that land to the most productive users becomes limited by that 5 hectares. And so we're quite glad to hear that the government is thinking about increasing that to at least larger plots to allow for more efficient agriculture production. That having been said, I don't know if ownership of land per se is the issue, but our various other restrictions on land ownership can have actually been create that difficulty, that obstacle for foreign and I would imagine even local investors alike.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on that from our panelists?
Well, in mining, if I may, it's not really a deterrent. If we want to operate in a deposit and it's land owned by landowners on top, you can always lease land. You don't necessarily have to own it. And most of the areas that are mineralized anyway are, shall we say, public lands or A&D, and you deal with government for that. So it's not really a deterrent in our sector.
Thank you. What
Well,
about
for tourism, it's not a major issue. We've done enough studies in the last few years that will show that ownership is not really a big factor. I think more important than that would be market demand, profitability, stable environment. Of course, if there are incentives, then that's something that investors would certainly welcome. So those are the fundamental factors that would come out of our studies when it comes to the factors that investors consider before investing here in Philippine tourism.
Thank you. Other comments? If there are none, I think that's it. We're done with our panel. Well, thank you very much. For me personally, this has been very informative. So over to you, Manette.
Thank you very much, Riza, and thank you so much to our dear panelists. By the way, to our delegates, please take note that during the midday sessions, you will have a chance to actually deep dive into these three very important areas, and you will have a chance to continue the conversations there in case you have more questions. But for now, we're almost halfway done for today's program. Before we go on break, our virtual room sponsor, Eastern Communications, would like to share with us a few details about their background, their products, and their services. So stay tuned because they're also giving away prizes for their mini game, the Kahoot game, in a short while. So without further ado, may I just turn you over now to Eastern Communications.
Every business knows that true success comes from strong connections built and established over time. Whether it's a connection between you and your business partners or your company and your consumers. At Eastern Communications, we believe in a strong and personal connection. In prioritizing both our high-tech and our high-touch solutions, we bring back the human connection in the ever-expanding industry of information and communications technology. In doing so, we've amassed a wide array of various solutions designed to not only improve our clients' businesses, but to also create seamless experiences for their own customers. This is why customized solutions and strong connections matter so much to us. Keep your company files safe and secure through data centers and cloud services that allow easy access for your employees and are scalable to match the needs of your business. We understand just how important proper collaboration and communication are to the success of a business, which is why we can offer your company the proper tools needed to enhance collaboration efficiency, all while maintaining an agile and flexible network that is scalable to the size of your company. These collaboration tools are key to developing your business's continuity and are easily accessible at any time and from any device, all while maintaining the security your company needs. Speaking of security, no matter what stage of a cyber attack you are in, Eastern Communications will always ensure that your company is prepared with the help of the Cyber Defense Suite. From before the attack happens, during the time it's in progress, and even after it begins to damage systems and steal information, Eastern Communications is equipped with products and services for every phase. Eastern also provides relevant managed services that suit your company's needs. That way, you can better focus on running your business and leave the technical aspect up to us. Of course, every business needs reliable connectivity in order to maintain its day-to-day processes. Our world-class data services ensure the smoothest flow of data and information for your company. Together, we can help you create personalized networks that are well-suited for your company's specific needs, containing all of the benefits with none of the hassle. If it's internet you need, Eastern Communications Internet Services can provide your company with fast connections and high bandwidth availabilities. This way, You have access to flexible speeds and stronger connections to the internet. Lastly, we want to help you establish your own strong connections with your company's partners and customers. Eastern's voice services offers seamless solutions for your customer service needs and easily connects you to your customers. These are only some of the many solutions and services that Eastern Communications has established over the years for our many partners. And while we still have a long way to go, you can be sure that Eastern Communications will continue to be your partner and take you from where you are now to where you want to go. Together, we can all finish strong for our tomorrow.
Hello, good morning mga ka-Eastern. I'm Alan Francis Angeles, Account Manager. And on behalf of everyone at the Eastern Communications, I would like to officially welcome you to the Eastern Communications virtual room. And we sincerely thank you for joining us here in our exhibit booth. I know you're all excited for our live virtual Kahoot game and for the exciting prizes that the 3 winners will be receiving. But before we proceed with our game, allow us to introduce first Eastern Communications. So who is Eastern Communications and how are we helping our clients on achieving their digital goals and their digital transformation journey? So who is Eastern Communications? Eastern Communications is a 142-year-old telecommunications company that provides cutting-edge connectivity services and ICT solutions that are unwavering, unflagging, and undeniably strong. As one of the biggest telco and ICT partner of choice in the Philippines, Eastern Communications is offering telecommunications products and services like internet, data, broadband DSL, and voice services, as well as ICT solutions such as data center and cloud services, cybersecurity, and managed services, and also collaboration solutions to address the changing needs of our clients. And we are continuously developing and growing our portfolio. On top of our solid and reliable technology, we delight our customers with our brand of personalized service because we believe that human connections are equally important. So Eastern Communications is a high tech. We made sure that we partner with the best-in-class solutions provider in order to offer only the best services to our customers. Further of our being high tech, we are also CE 2.0 MEF certified, which means we have the highest certification or standard when it comes to network. We are also high touch. Eastern Communications is the first telecommunications company to receive the ISO 9000 2015 mark for the business operations. This certification shows that our ability to deliver excellent product and services. Also, we partnered with relevant industry associations and business chambers who best represent the industry that we support. And we make sure that we forge a strong relationship with these associations. This is by the way of supporting their initiative, such as AmCham, CanCham, ANCCham, ECCP, and many more. Well, not just through sponsorship support, but more importantly, through the sharing of ideas and close collaborations on their activities that would help them address their members' needs. So we also establish strong partnerships with our international partners to make sure that we can cater to their requirements of our local and international customers. And at the lower part of the slide shows the awards and recognitions that we received from various award-giving bodies for businesses, such as Asia Pacific Stevie's Anvil and Quill Awards. serve as a validation that we are on the right path, a reminder to keep on striving to do our best for our clients, and an inspiration to do better. All right. Also, just last month, Eastern Communications won the Telco of the Year at the recently concluded Asia Leaders Award 2020. So this award and those that I've mentioned on the previous slide solidify our commitment in providing our customer with high-tech and high-touch solution or best-in-class services. This won't be possible without the trust and support of our valued clients. All right. So how Eastern Communication, a telco and ICT solutions provider, helps our clients? So Eastern Communications is offering high-tech telco products and services like internet, data, and voice services, as well as innovative ICT solutions such as managed services, collaboration solutions, data center, and cloud services, as well as Eastern Cyber Defense Suite to address the changing needs of high-end technology. One of our different differentiators or main edge among our competitors is that we are high touch. We are better when it comes to responsive to our customers. We delight them with our brand of personalized services. With Eastern Communications, it's not just a business. It's always a strong and personal connection. And to present some of our products and services that can help and support your businesses, allow me to call on Francis.
Yeah. Good morning, guys. Good morning, Maka Eastern, Sir Alan. Thank you so much for that wonderful company profile from Eastern Communications. So right now, I'm actually here to discuss a bit more about our featured products. So firstly, we have here our Eastern Teleworker Gateway. Telecommuting has become a way for companies to maintain business operations. Aside from having a stable internet connection and productivity tools, securing company data is equally important as well. With cyber attacks on the rise, you must ensure that your workforce can securely access company network resources from where they are working. Eastern Communications Teleworker Gateway can surely maintain your company's productivity and efficiency. So to know more, you can talk to us. You can, there is a, yeah, you may scan the QR code below to know more about the product. And next product will be our Eastern Cyber Defense Suite. Prevent your business 24/7 from being attacked by cyber threats online with Eastern Communication cybersecurity solutions. Since the threat landscape is constantly changing and traditional security solutions can't keep up, your business is vulnerable from cyber attacks. With Eastern Cyber Defense, we provide your business with a state-of-the-art, constant, and relentless advanced security that can detect, assess, protect, respond, and to recover to cyber attacks. And lastly, easy off-the-shelf cloud services. Discover more ways for your workforce to be productive anytime, anywhere, and in any devices with Eastern Communications Cloud Services. Eastern Cloud is one of the most customizable cloud platforms in the market that gives customer the power to provide processing, storage, networks, and other fundamental computing resources where you need it, when you need it. To know more about this product, you can scan the QR code below, or you may also contact our cluster managers. Yeah, Mr. Joey Chico and also Ms. Jen Velasco. Okay, so now we're going to move into our, because here in Eastern, it's not only about connectivity and ICT solutions. We also would love to have fun with our clients as well. So right now, we're going to play Kahoot. I encourage everybody to go to kahoot.it or download the Kahoot app on Play Store or App Store. Enter the game pin flashed on the screen right now. And kindly please register using your full name so that we can easily identify you for the prizes. So there will be 10 questions and you're given 10 seconds each to answer each one of the questions. So enjoy the game, Ka-Eastern. Okay, so you may join. I encourage you to join our Kahoot game. I'll be giving so the pin will be 81717. So again, I encourage you to join Kahoot game. So you may win very good prizes in this game. Okay, so I see some players right now. Again, I encourage you to use your full name so that we can easily identify you and we can easily contact you whenever you win the prize. Okay, so we have here 12 players already, 13. Come on, join in, guys. This will be fun. All right, Miss Lee, Deb, Libby, Sophia. Okay, I encourage you to join more, guys. Okay, so right now we have 21 players. Okay, you might win very good prizes here. So again, I encourage you to join. Just go to kahoot.io. Yeah, we have 23, 24, 25. Downstairs, Luis. And the questions will be very easy. I'm pretty sure that you can easily answer these questions. Okay, so we have 27. Okay, Miss Riza, Mr. Clyde. Okay, so we now have 27 participants, 28. And again, for people who still want to join the Kahoot game, the pin will be 81717. And you may win prizes here. So yeah, let's enjoy the game and win prizes. Okay, so we now have 30. Okay, last 10 seconds, guys. I'll be counting down now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, Master Lee, you're the last player. So we have 35 players total in Kahoot. Okay, so I think we can start the game already. Okay. So Arangkada 2020, are you ready for the first question? Okay, the event that will be happening on December, is it the 6th Arangkada Philippine Forum, maybe the 8th, the 9th, or maybe the 4th? Which one will be it? Okay, so everybody got the correct answer. Congratulations. All right, so for placer will be Sir PJ. All right, keep it up. All right, question number 2. What telco was founded in 1878? Is it a telephone company? Maybe it's the China Telephone Company or Eastern Extension Australia. Which one will be it? Okay, 25 got the correct answer. Congratulations, good job. All right. Okay, Miss Verna is now on the lead. Okay, good job. Miss Sandra, Miss Lewis, you can do it. All right, for the third question, what products and solutions does Eastern Communications offer? So, voice, managed services, ICT solutions, maybe all of the above. Which one will be it? Okay, good job. It's all of the above. So we have 27 correct answers. And for the leader, Miss Verna Alvarez. Good job. All right. Next one, question number 4. What Eastern product solutions were discussed in this virtual booth? Microsoft 365, MPLS, or SD1? Which one will be it? Okay, good job, guys. So most of you got the correct answer, cloud services. All right, so the leader for Sandra Mogliari, congratulations and good job. Okay, keep it up. You still do it. Okay, question number 5. What Eastern products and services were not discussed in this virtual room? So, coworker gateway, cyber defense suite, or MSPs? Which one is not discussed? Okay, good job. Most of you got the correct answers again. It's actually Microsoft Teams. All right, so for the leader, Lee. Wow, good job. You're now number 1. All right, for the next question, question number 6. How many product portfolio does Eastern Communications have? So 3, probably 5, or maybe 4. Okay, so yeah, the correct answer is 6. We have 6 product lines for Eastern portfolio. Congratulations, guys. Good job. Okay, for Lee. Wow, good job. Okay, keep it up. Next, question number 7. Who will be the keynote speaker during the closing keynote speech on day 3? So, Duterte, Secretary Morales, VP Lady Robredo, or Mr. Julian Payne? You know the answer, Julian. Okay, good job. So it is Mr. Secretary Carlo Nograles. Okay, so for the leader, it's Lee. Okay. So for the next question, question number 8. So what is the topic title of Arangkada Forum? Foreign investments in the post-pandemic, foreign investments in the post-pandemic Philippines, foreign investment in the pre-pandemic, foreign investigations in the post-pandemic. Okay, most of you got the correct answer. It's actually foreign investment in the post-pandemic Philippines. Okay, so let's see our leaderboards. Okay, Julius C is now the leader. Wow, good job. Okay, for the next question. Who will do the welcome remarks in Donde? Secretary Carlo Alexi Nograles, President Rodrigo Duterte, Mr. Julian Payne, or VP Leni Robredo? Okay, I think most of them were actually on the day 1. They were really active. Good job, guys. So let's see the leaderboards. Okay, Julius C is still the leader for this one. Okay, last question, guys. Where is Eastern Communications head office located? Pasay, Ortigas, or maybe Makati? Okay, good job, guys. So yeah, ETPI is actually located in Makati in Center Hill, Puyat. Okay, so let's see who will be the winner for the Hoot game. Okay, for the 3rd place, Mr. P. Okay, Chris will be the champion. Will you see? Congratulations. Okay. All right. So, yeah. Okay. So for the winners, yeah, you can type in their name, their mobile number. We will be showing the contact details as well. Yeah, but again, you can type in your name, your mobile number, your email address in the chat box. Okay. So that, we will be contacting you. Thank you so much for participating in our program. Congratulations again to our winners. I hope that we all have fun. And again, thank you so much, mga ka-Eastern. And to finally end this program, please watch this video.
Have you ever felt defeated? As if life hasn't thrown enough setbacks, failures, and challenges? It may seem like the world has turned its back on you, where hope doesn't exist. But you cannot let defeat define you. Life prepares you for success by allowing you to experience failures. That's when you come out stronger after the setbacks, after the failures, and after the challenges. A strong determination is fueled by a powerful force, encouraging you to endure in the face of defeat. Stand tall,